Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. Iran has the bomb. Checkmate. Game over. But before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. I mean, hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Salute, family. Let's get right into the content this morning.
Undeclared wars are commonplace. Tragically, our government engages in preemptive war, otherwise known as a
anything to do. Does Iran have a deliverable nuclear weapon?
I don't know. All I know is this. And I know you had Pepe on earlier. I haven't had a chance to fully watch what he said, but I know that we've been in sync on this. We received information last week, last Thursday, late on Thursday. It is from a source in Pakistan that is the position and access of this person is such that this information that we were provided with is the kind of stuff that this person would have access to. We're not saying it was, we're not talking about some taxi driver or somebody who's sitting in a shawarma station. This is someone who actually had access to this information. And, the sequence, what we were told, what we looked at this information is that in the aftermath of the U.S. attacks on Iran in the Persian Gulf, the attacks at Bandar Abbas, the attacks in Qasem Island, the attack that killed 4 Iranian sailors, that the Iranian National Security Council met, and out of that meeting, President Pezeshkian was directed to call up Prime Minister Sharif and basically say 3 things. And those 3 things were, and remember, we're getting this information last week. And when I talked to you on Monday at 9:30, we didn't even have the first part of this, which was Iran was going to pull out of negotiations. They were going to end the negotiations with the United States. Now, remember when we talked on Monday at 9 to 9:30, that news had not broken.
Right.
But that was the first thing that this source said was going to happen. After that, it went,
so the source was accurate, but that decision had nothing to do with nukes. That's because the Israelis continued to bomb up.
No, it had everything to do with nukes.
Okay, go ahead.
Because that was the first decision that was communicated to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Sharif, by President Pezeshkian. He said, next, we'll withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty. We're going to withdraw from talks about nukes. That's going to be off the table. And then 3, and it's conditional that if these attacks, if you don't get the Israelis back in the corral to stop attacking the Lebanese people and the Palestinian people, and if you don't stop your attacks on us, then there will be a demonstration where we will detonate a nuclear device so that you know that we have one. That was the essence of it.
Well, that is the guts of what Pepe told us 3 hours ago.
Yeah. No, I mean that's what. Now listen, people say, "Well, how do you know? Look, folks? All we're doing is reporting what a source who we know has access, what he's saying. Now, is he lying? Possibly, but I'm just saying he believes it. That's why he's saying it, because after that, Sharif got on the phone with this foreign minister and said, inform Marco Rubio, inform the United States. Pakistan's foreign minister gets on the phone, talks to Rubio. Now, here's another reason I think this information is credible. Have you noticed the change in Donald Trump's tone vis-a-vis Iran over the last 4 days? Has he been talking about, I'm going to obliterate them? We're going to eliminate their civilization. We're going to wipe them out. No, he was saying that weeks ago. But he's in fact been surprisingly conciliatory. And notice yesterday that the United States again attacked an Iranian ship with a Hellfire missile fired by a helicopter that came out of Bahrain, and then attacked a communication station. And Iran retaliated by hitting a ship connected to the United States with an anti-ship missile, punching a hole in its side, and attacked the U.S. airfields in Kuwait, and including the Kuwaiti International Airport. So, and at no point did Donald Trump come out and say, "See, Iran, you're getting what it takes. We're showing." None of that. True social man. He was silent. Silent.
Right. When we started this interview, I asked you if Iran had a nuclear weapon. You said you don't know. Do you believe it does? Do you believe these sources that reached out to you and Pepe?
What I believe is they believe it. Okay. And look, I could make a case.
All right, let me just stop you. Is this correct? What you said on Sonar 21 earlier today?
Yes.
Okay.
So, let me put it this way. It looks like now Donald Trump and his administration are taking that seriously. So it is. This doesn't
expect that CIA, MI6, and Mossad know this.
I would hope so, but and again, this doesn't invalidate previous assessments by the intelligence community that Iran didn't have a nuke, but the circumstances have changed, and those circumstances are the cumulative effect of Iran's attempts to enter into negotiations with the United States to achieve what the previous administrations and the Trump administration claimed was that Iran would not have a nuclear device, and yet. Every time Iran entered in, they did it with JCPOA. Trump tore it up and walked away. They did it last June. They were in negotiations with the United States on that. Israel launches a surprise sneak attack that led to the 12-day war. And then 2 days, on the 26th of February, the prime minister, the foreign minister of Oman is in Washington talking about how great the talks, the progress that was made in Switzerland between the United States and Iran, that he was hopeful and optimistic an agreement would come. And the United States had already made a decision to attack Iran.
Right.
And that attack was launched 2 days later. So the Iranians are like, you know what? Whatever we do, they ignore. And so I think a decision was made shortly after that, okay, we're now going to get an active nuclear device so that we can defend ourselves. Not to use offensively, but at least to say, okay, now we got it. So stop.
I'm going to play a clip, which is a composite of what Pepe told us this morning, and ask you to comment on it. And after the clip, I'm going to ask you, did your source reveal where it came from? Was it domestically developed, or did some country, and I'll ask you what countries would be in that category, gave it to them? But here's Pepe this morning, Larry. It's about 2 minutes long.
Sure. I asked our Pakistani connection to, can you grill this guy again and again and again? And at the end, we got a definitive answer. Look, if I didn't want you to break the story, I wouldn't never have given it to you. And this is what our sources reveal to us. And this is the bombshell in itself. Pezeshkian to Sharif over the phone directly, he delivered a very well-structured 3-step sort of ultimatum that he said to Sharif should be communicated to the White House immediately. Number one, which is something that the Iranians have been insisting on for the past few weeks. No nuclear talks, that's it, unless we go to stage number one, end of all wars. Stage number two, we start discussing Strait of Hormuz. Then we have nuclear talks. Point number two, no more prospective nuclear treaty framework. These were the words that our source
meaning nothing like the JCPOA?
Exactly. Not even getting towards a JCPOA, which, considering the circumstances, the best the Trump administration can get now is a sort of diluted JCPOA. And the Iranians are saying, no, not even that. Because first you need to go to stage 1 and 2, end of all wars, and then we start discussing Hormuz. Without that, we discuss nothing. And then the number 3, which is at the heart of what we revealed on Monday. And of course, there's a lot of controversy, more than expected everywhere. Pezeshkian said, if American threats persist, we can go for the detonation of a nuclear device on Iranian soil without specifying. Is this a bomb that Iran already has? Is this a bomb that only Iran developed? Is this a bomb that they could count on Russian input to develop? Or it was delivered, ready-made, let's put it this way, by Pakistan or by North Korea? Nothing. The source did not elaborate on that. He was elaborating on what Pezeshkian actually told Sharif. So this detonation would happen in the words of Pezeshkian, translated by our source, executed not as an act of war, but as an irreversible sovereign demonstration of capability to control escalation dominance.
Agreed?
Yep. Oh, yeah. No, it's absolutely right. It is. How did Iran do this? Call to mind Ringo Starr's song, I Get By With a Little Help from My Friends. Iran has the scientific engineering capability to do it. And the major reason up to this point that they have never entertained even getting a nuclear device was because within it's not just confined to Shia theology, but within Islam, killing non-combatants is a sin. And it's one thing to kill military personnel, but killing non-combatants is a sin. So that's why they stayed away from that. The same way that they didn't go after chemical weapons during the war with Iraq back in the 1980s, even though we, the United States, were supplying Iraq with the chemical weapons or the precursors to make it. So
where do you think the nuclear device or devices, and I'll have to ask you how many you think there are, because surely if they have only one, they're not going to waste it in the desert. But where do you think the nuclear devices originated?
No, I think they originated within, most likely within Iran. Now, the important point to make that, as Pepe noted, Pezeshkian was directed to communicate to the Prime Minister of Pakistan. They talked over the phone. I'm pretty sure that they don't have a secure telephone, that they're not using a tactical satellite radio. Well, I could be wrong.
CIA, MI6, and Mossad heard it.
Yeah, that's my point. In fact, that may have been the very point, the reason they did it. If they did it over an open line, they wanted to make sure that everybody heard it, including Israelis, Unit 8200. They intercepted it, United States. And so everybody's got to now take a big breath and go, is this for real? Again, when you get into these kinds of issues with intelligence, this person, once you know the bona fides of the person, you know that they do have this kind of access. They are not hearing something around the water cooler, or they're not hearing rumors in the bathroom. This is something that they would have been involved with the decision making from the standpoint of Pakistan, knowing what is being communicated with Iran and what Iran is communicating with them. So, and that's why I say I am struck by how cautious Trump has been. This so far that we're day 3 this week since that news broke, and I don't recall him once making an overt threat against Iran like he did 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. So I think the intelligence community says they very well may have one. They may very well more than one, because I think both Ted Postle's made the point, and I think John Mearsheimer made the same point on your show yesterday.
Right.
That if they're going to do it, they better have more than one, because if you got multiples, then that changes Israel's entire calculation.
So what do Israel and the United States do now? Try and find out where these things are and destroy them, or can they not be destroyed?
Yeah, they'll be kept in a where they can't be destroyed. I mean, Iran's nuts. You know, they started building. They built all these underground cities and missile factories in the aftermath of 2003 when we invaded Iraq, and they were hardened specifically against a nuclear blast. And we've already seen that, you know, these are so-called obliterated. Even U.S. intelligence has reported over the last 2 weeks that, you know, these things that were supposedly obliterated, they're wide open and operating again. So I think actually, and this may be the silver lining to this, it creates more incentive for an actual serious negotiation on the part of the United States. But part of that's going to require reining in Israel to get Israel to stop its campaign of murdering Lebanese and Palestinians.
Well, only a Donald Trump with a backbone can do that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking of the bitter irony, and you and I, and you know, all the guys and gals on the show have talked about this, of Tulsi Gabbard saying under oath before the Congress, Iran has not been developing a nuclear weapon since 2003, and then Trump saying, I don't care what she says, I think they do have one. Now it turns out she was wrong and Trump was right.
Well, no, she wasn't wrong. When she testified on that, she was correct. They hadn't done it.
This is a very recent vintage, because that testimony is about 14 months ago.
No, I think this is recent vintage. Again, Iran didn't make this decision until after February 28th. For the second time, Iran was attacked out of the blue after engaging in good faith negotiations. In fact, this last round, they were talking about having made the most progress they had in any prior negotiation. And what does the United States do along with Israel? They assassinate the top leadership.
Right.
And here's Mojtaba Khamenei, the new Ayatollah. He's there. He witnesses the death of his wife, the death of his baby girl, the death of his father, the death of his mother. And now he's in a position to influence this decision. You tell me any decent person in the world, if they witnessed their family being murdered, that they wouldn't seek some sort of justice? I mean, we're talking. This has nothing to do with any particular culture. This is ingrained in human beings. If you attack my family, I will defend my family.
Right.
And
has anybody picked this up besides you and Pepe? Anybody in the West covering this besides Judging Freedom?
Some other podcasts have mentioned it, but no, it hasn't. You know, and you know, people are going to come out and say, "Oh, Johnson's making." Look, folks, all I'm doing is telling you what a source that both Pepe and I have been able to check out, that we believe that this person has access to this kind of information, is in a position to know this kind of thing. And that's what he is saying. He believes it. Now, can I prove that? Absolutely, I can't. So
you mentioned
there's the caveat.
You mentioned the Beatles song. I mean, what outside help might they have had? Pakistan itself, North Korea, Russia,
China, all of the above. I mean, right now, Russia and China are actively engaged with helping Iran stabilize in the aftermath of that attack on the 28th. And there's ample reports about both technology, military equipment, technical advice from experts. All of that's being provided. And, you know, I imagine one of the things I learned yesterday from it's a recently retired member of the U.S. military, an officer who was involved with Intel. And he's been directly involved with the stuff surrounding Central Command that has oversight of this war with Iran. He said there's a lot of frustration among the Intel analysts because the intelligence is being ignored. So I said, okay, that is, and you know, that may in part be, part of Tulsi Gabbard's frustration. And then, let's compound that with, here's Trump bringing in a man that is completely, totally unqualified to be director of national intelligence. And it's making a joke. But on the other hand, Trump now has got, if the intelligence community has come back in and said, hey, yeah, we intercepted, we've got the recording of Pezeskian's conversation with Prime Minister Sharif, and that's what they said. What Johnson and Escobar are saying, that's exactly what they said.
Wow.
So
how will I'm getting to the home builder becoming the DNI. How will the intelligence community react to this guy? The statute itself, the statute creating this requires a substantial amount of experience and intelligence.
Yeah. They'll be popping champagne corks because they'll have this doofus sitting at the top. He won't know what to even look for. They'll be running circles around him. They'll be feeding him cow manure and telling him it's a new form of chocolate mousse.
All right, consistent with your shirt today. Thank you, Larry. Thank you very much for breaking this news with us.
Outside of St. Petersburg, it's not in the city. And today there was, let's say, a Ukrainian commemoration. Can you all believe that Starlink guided drones attacked an oil terminal outside of St. Petersburg? It's not in the city. It's outside of St. Petersburg, not far from the airport. So when I land tomorrow morning, I can even look at it from the window of the plane. And guess what? Do you know who's in town for the St. Petersburg Forum? Elon Musk's dad. Sorry, Elon Musk's dad, Elon Musk, which we met last year when he came to a forum here in Moscow, was in February last year, if I remember well. So he is in town, and drones with Starlink, his son's.
These are little gift.
The thing is everything is so completely absurd, and and they think that they are going to intimidate the Russians because on the day of the most important business forum of the year in Russia and one of the most important in all across Asia, they're going to be intimidated by that. Here we are. Well, this is going to be one of the best discussions, but outside of the roundtables in St. Petersburg. There are some very interesting roundtables on the SEO, on BRICS, on investment. The guest of honor this year is Saudi Arabia, but that's quite interesting, Nima. MBS is not coming. Why? Because he's too afraid to leave Saudi Arabia, to leave Riyadh. Fear of flying, fear of an internal coup, fear of what the Americans may come up with. Because don't forget that Saudi Arabia is in the peace with Iran camp, sort of, but they are not at war against Iran like the Emirates are. So he's not coming. He sent the Minister of Industry. But they are the guests of honor of this year. So, okay, short story for all of you. There's going to be a lot of business deals, lots of the Global South talking to everybody else, trying to clinch deals, energy, AI, etc. And then on Friday, we have the big guy, the plenary session. So Moscow time is usually around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, Moscow time. So Putin makes a speech, which is usually around 40 minutes or so. Then he brings the guests of honor, including the Saudis. And then there's the Q&A. And that's when it gets really interesting, because I'm sure a lot of questions are going to be related to, okay, so what happens? What happens now with this war? Are you going for the jugular, like you did in the last array of zircons, sarmats, you name it, ballistic and hypersonics on Kiev? And the idea is to flatten the whole industrial military complex around Ukraine for the next few weeks and months. Is that it? If Putin says yes, Nima, and all of you, this means that the bear is finally fed up. And that's it. Let's destroy everything. Of course, everything in terms of the industrial military complex. And there's always the possibility of hitting the Baltic Chihuahuas. Because most of these drones, they're coming from outside of Ukraine as well. So we are entering a new stage of this never-ending war, and this is something that you can feel already. I arrived here from Shanghai this weekend. I'm sorry, and I talked to a lot of people already.
Take a sip.
And obviously, my cough still continues. Yeah. Okay, guys, but this means that from the ground level to people related to diplomacy, think tanks, intel agencies, and tomorrow I'm going to see around business, man. There's a consensus already that this has gone too long. And it's time to tweak the strategy. This means not only the attrition war, which Russia has been conducting since 2022, but now you have to go to the next level, and because now the war has changed. Now it's a drone war organized by NATO. So you have to go against the source. And everybody's talking about, you see what the Iranians are doing? So now people who decide in Russia, they look at Iran and they see Iran as an example. Of course, you cannot compare both wars because they are extremely different. And Iran, for instance, in terms of fighting Israel, they are fighting a military power that has no red lines. It's a genocidal military power. And the Americans in the beginning, during the war, the 40-something days of the war, they were destroying a civilian Iranian infrastructure as well. The Russians still have this, they're still thinking that, and reality is saying otherwise. These are our Slavic brothers. So, maybe they'll come back to the fold later. No, forget it. They are completely brainwashed. If there is some sort of understanding between Ukraine and Russia, is going to take at least another 2 generations, if not more. And the brainwashing campaign was so strong that Russophobia rules all across Ukraine, Western Ukraine, of course. So obviously Russia's approach to the war has to change. And people are starting to direct their criticism directly now at Putin. And this is a very, very serious matter. And there are elections here in Russia in September. So Putin's party may lose a lot of votes because of that. I was discussing this 2 days ago with people who know how the system works and the insatisfaction against and a certain, I wouldn't say a perception of insecurity, but there's already, in many parts of Russia, anxiety or angst really at, okay, so we're going to have a drone attack here again. So this is from the point of view of maintaining stability in Russia, this is not good at all. And there's, of course, already an enormous debate on whether the Ministry of Defense screwed up. without realizing that the logic of the war changed radically, especially this year, this first few months of this year. And now it's a terrorist drone war. And maybe they were not prepared for it. So these are, I would say, some of the most pressing questions around the St. Petersburg Forum, apart from deal making, of course. And it's great because there's a lot of the global south already arrived today, and will arrive tomorrow. A lot from West Asia. Apparently, Nima, there are a lot of people from Iran. Interesting. Not only from Saudi Arabia and Emirates, unfortunately, because Emirates and Russia, they have a very close relationship. And of course, India, a strong Chinese delegation, lots of Africans as well. So I would say a sizable chunk of the global south is coming here for business. That's the good part. But of course, the everything is going to be more or less overshadowed by, okay, what happens with this war from now on?
Pepe, the situation with the society, Russian society, you've mentioned about the way they're feeling about the battlefield. It's some sort of frustration because they see what's going on with the war and how Ukrainians are using these drones against civilians in Russia. Exactly. And they don't see the response as immediate as, they want something more direct or harder to happen against Ukraine.
Much harder. Absolutely. Yeah, if you talk with people related to the Intel apparatus, the logic is let's go for the head of the snake, which is something we should have done already. And people from think tanks and diplomats, they're slightly more measured, but they also say, look, there's got to be some tweaking. And in the end, this corroborates what our friend Professor Karaganov has been saying for months. And I think I commented with you that on my last day here in late February, 4 days before the start of the war by the Americans on Iran, was my last night in Moscow. I had an off the record with Professor Karaganov at his office at the Higher School of Economics. And I promised him that I would not publish anything about conversation. That's why, because it was a free flow conversation, absolutely great. But one of the things that I can talk about is that he was already saying that the only language that Europeans and NATO understand is fear. So this means we have to tweak our approach. Apparently now, the big bear up there, who's going to deliver his speech on Friday, is getting the message. And now this is practically a national consensus, Nima, especially after the Russian Donbass equivalent of the killing of the girls in Minab, in Starobelsk, in Donbass. This was, forgive me the horrible metaphor, but a sort of mini Minab. We didn't have, of course, 168 dead girls, but we had 21 children and teenagers killed, which is still, from the Russian point of view, this is like, beyond inadmissible. So they are urging a very, very hardcore response. So it's up to the big bear how this is going to develop. Okay, every week, they have enough missiles to do a mega attack every week if they want. And they have already the target map of all the vital installations, producing components, drone factories, links, industrial military complex, etc. It's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah. Pepe, I think you've mentioned the case of the West Asia, and you've mentioned how Saudi Arabia, Iran, UAE, all these countries that are in an active war in the Middle East, they're going to be there in St. Petersburg. But we had a confrontation between Iran and the United States last night. And this is not the first time they're fighting each other. But it was important because Iran, since the ceasefire started, this is the first time Iran had some sort of considerable attack, I would say.
Considerable, yeah.
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 It wasn't like this before, but it was considerable because they hit many of these tankers close to UAE. They hit the targets in Bahrain, in Kuwait. International airport in Kuwait was hit by
direct hit on the fifth state.
Yeah. This is new, and we had the foreign minister of Iran saying that every attack on Iran gonna be responded immediately.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Correct. And of course, the RGC saying it's not going to be symmetrical. Now it's going to be 1.5 harder than the American attack. So it's not symmetrical anymore. Each American attack, the response is going to be 1.5 times more hardcore. And this could go to 2 times more hardcore or 3 times hardcore. So now there are no rules. And they're going for the jugular. You know, these bases in Kuwait, these 2 bases in Kuwait, very, very important. And of course, attack the 5th Fleet directly. That's wow. That's quite something. And by the way, all this bullshit about the attacking the civilian airport in Kuwait was bullshit. This was malfunction of what? Again, patriots. So in fact, the airport in Kuwait City was hit by American patriots, malfunctioning American patriots.
Yeah.
There we go. So this will continue. And obviously, once again, proving to everyone with a brain that there's no ceasefire. The ceasefire doesn't even qualify as a joke.
Just imagine having this war and this sort of conflict. And Donald Trump is talking today. He said that he's going to meet with the supreme leader of Iran.
Yes, he's going to call Mustafa, can I jump in and we're going to have an ice cream together in Tehran? Yeah, of course. And the Iranians are going to say, come. Look, we are approaching levels of senility, unseen since the previous Autopen administration, right? But that's another story. So, Nima, I have to go back to the bombshell of the week, which Larry and I revealed on Monday. And for that, we are both getting a lot of flack from everywhere. Totally expected. Larry has zillions of years of experience with the CIA, and I have zillions of years of experience being a foreign correspondent everywhere. So we are used to being attacked. So when stupid people don't understand anything, they attack the messengers, which is the case. Well, very, very important. On Monday, Larry and I, along with Zulfikar Ali, we are involved in a new project, launching a new platform called Power Shift. During the past week, we got information from an absolutely hardcore, top-shelf source about what happened between President Pezeshkian and Pakistani Prime Minister Sharif. It was a phone call last Thursday that lasted 105 minutes, and our source had the full briefing about the phone call. And during this phone call, something immensely important happened. President Pezeshkian told Sharif over the phone that, number one, there are no more nuclear negotiations from now on. Number two, why? Because the Americans are not respecting the Iranian order for the proceedings that the Iranians were basically talking about every day. First, you end all wars, including blockades, including the Israeli war against Lebanon and Hezbollah. Number two, we start discussing Strait of Hormuz. And only on the third stage, we get to trying to get a new nuclear dossier. So Pezeshkian said, number one, no more nuclear talks. Number two, even the remote idea of trying to have negotiations leading to a possible new nuclear deal, which would be a sort of diluted JCPOA. Not even that, the Iranians are saying. And number three, which is the killer. And I want to quote the words of how the source put it to us. This is, Nima, this is what Pezeshkian said. So we have to assume that the conversation was, I would say, Farsi and Urdu on the phone, maybe with an English translator for both sides, because Pezeshkian doesn't speak English. Sharif does. So there was a translator involved. So maybe this is a direct translation from Farsi to English. So Pezeshkian said, if American threats persist, which is the case now, we should conduct the detonation of a nuclear device on Iranian soil, executed not as an act of war, but as an irreversible sovereign demonstration of capability to control escalation dominance. Well, this is as incandescent as it gets, right? So what happened immediately afterwards? Well, first of all, Nima, you know that Pezeshkian would never say that to the Pakistani prime minister without clearing it with Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei. It's quite obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
Assuming our sources, that, in fact, Larry and I, we kept asking questions one day after another until he said, look, if I didn't want this information to be in the public domain, I would never have passed it to my Pakistani connection, but pass it to you. So he, I would say he backs his information 1,000,000%, because this guy is on the table. This guy is in the direct negotiation between Iran, between Iran and US on the Pakistani side. So he's on top of the chain. So what would lead Iran to pivot from nuclear ambiguity, which is the current Iranian position, to having an undeniable demonstration on Iranian soil? And of course, everybody's asking the obvious questions. Okay, what kind of bomb is that? Is this an Iranian bomb, meaning totally developed indigenously in Iran? And it's very easy because Iran has excellent scientists. Wouldn't be a problem to develop a nuclear weapon. Did they have outside help? In this case, there are a few candidates. The number one candidate is Russia. Did they get, let's say, ready-made bomb from either Pakistan or North Korea? It's also possible. Did they have input from North Korea? Because the discussions at the nuclear level between Iran and North Korea have been very, very strong for quite a while. So obviously, nobody knows anything about that, and the source did not elaborate on that. First of all, because he was basically telling us what happened during the phone call. So this means that Pezeshkian didn't have to explain to Pakistan anything about the Iranian nuclear program, because the Pakistanis already know everything, right? So what happened immediately afterwards? Well, Sharif, the prime minister, when he heard that, he said, wow, he understood the seriousness of it all. So he ordered his foreign minister, Dar, who was in New York, to call the Americans immediately. So what he did, he called Marco Rubio. And then Marco Rubio said, no, come to Washington. So the next day, he goes to Washington. And he sits down in front of Rubio and he explains the whole thing. So this was on May 29th, Nima. That was last Friday. And guess what happened on May 29th, last Friday? Trump stopped talking and acting and ordering any kinetic action against Iran immediately afterwards. Okay, now we're back this week. Considering once again that Trump's attention span is of a kid and it lasts only a few seconds or minutes, perhaps he even forgot what he learned last week from Rubio himself. Rubio briefed him, right? So now kinetic action is back. But we can change it. We can detect a different tone already on Trump. He's not threatening Iran anymore for the past few days. That's where we get to the, okay, I'm going to stop by in Tehran and have an ice cream with Mujtaba Khamenei. Before he was saying he was going to annihilate Iran, he was going to send Iran back to the Stone Ages, he was going to exterminate a civilization, you name it. So the tone changed. So that's already quite something. Because, and then there's an extra thing. Two things that Dar told Rubio in Washington face to face. Number one, Iran will not surrender any of its highly enriched uranium. Nothing. And that's a final position. The US simply cannot change this position. We all know that Iran was never willing to transfer highly enriched uranium outside of Iran. We already knew that. But now the Americans have a confirmation from the Pakistani foreign minister directly to them. And number two, Dar told Rubio that China is directly involved because China has delivered state-of-the-art strategic defense systems, especially shoulder-fired man-pads, via third countries. So they have plausible deniability. You've seen the rumors of the Americans commenting that China is supplying high-tech to Iran. Well, they already suspected that. So now they got a straight-out confirmation from the Pakistani foreign minister. What this means? This means that this trio, this triad, this strategic alignment is totally in effect. And it's Iran, Pakistan, and China working together. So you can imagine, Nima, how freaked out the Americans are after that. Nah? And there's nothing they can do against it. First of all, because they are counting on the Pakistanis to help get some sort of off-ramp with Iran, even though the Americans obviously have no idea what they want. Number one, they keep changing their demands one day after another. If they agree on something, the next day they change again. So the possibility of having a deal between Iran and US, I would say, are less than zero as it goes on. What if there's no deal? What are the Americans are going to do? They're going to restart the war? No, it's impossible for them. They don't have the means. It's totally opposed by US domestic opinion. They know that every scenario leads to a quagmire even worse than what they are now. And worse, the Iranians are prepared for the war to go on. And that's what they have been demonstrating with these provocations, one provocation after another. Okay, so now we'll respond 1.5 times harder and soon maybe more. They're not intimidated, on the contrary. So this is where we are. Well, in terms of this hypothetical nuclear bomb, I am waiting for a response from Iran. And Nima and all of you, this is with our friends at The Cradle. I'm sure you all know that I am a columnist for The Cradle as well. So I sent them the article that I already wrote, which basically what I have been explaining to you this past few minutes, it's inside the column. And it's going to land at the desk of one of the members of Mojtaba Khamenei's inner circle. And that's the great thing. And he said, yes, I will respond. It was supposed to be tonight. It's probably going to be tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, I would say Iran-Moscow timeline. So when we get to Friday, we already have a response that is practically official, because this guy is at the top of the food chain in Tehran. And then I want to publish the column telling all the story, including the official Iranian position. And then that's it, you know. So we can imagine that the Iranians are going to go probably for plausible deniability, because this is immensely sensitive. But it doesn't matter. They can phrase in a way that will be what the Americans call a no response response. And it can be sophisticated enough, and the Iranians are master at it, that you can read it any way you want it. Because obviously they're not going to say that their president was lying to the Pakistani prime minister. That's not the case. And if Pezeshkian actually said that to Sharif, he had a go-ahead from above. No question about that. And obviously showing that we are fed up with all your bullshit, and that's it. If you keep provoking us, this is what we're going to do. You should take this into consideration from now on. So this is where we are, Nima. It's an extremely complex, sensitive conjunction, but we were lucky to have the trust of people who are part of negotiations to pass this information to us via our Pakistani connections. And Larry and I, we have been in a few podcasts trying to explain, and now with you, trying to explain where things are and why we trust the information. This is the most important thing. I'm not talking about agendas, hidden agendas. Is there anything behind it? And all that. For instance, a lot of stupid idiot people are already accusing us of being ISI agents. Give me a break. Look, I worked in Pakistan a lot. Can you imagine that 25 years ago, I was being accused of being an ISI agent because I was doing the back and forth between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Same thing. So some things never change, right? But these people have no idea how information at this level works. And of course, our role as independent analysts, if we stumble into something like that, we have to make it public, as incandescent as it is. Okay, so this is a short version of a very complex, ongoing story. This is ongoing. We're gonna have more news tomorrow. And we already have something that we can disclose next week, which is the Iran-Pakistan nuclear-related relations for the past 40 years. And we have this documented. This weekend, Larry and I will be reading the documents. So that's where we are.
Pepe, did the source say what was the necessity of Iran announcing this right now? Because it didn't seem to me, because looking at the war, they don't need to, they have it. They somehow defeated the United States with conventional weapons. They have the Strait of Hormuz. So what was the necessity? I'm talking about what was the context of the talks between the two presidents that Iran needed to mention that.
You're absolutely right. And before all that happened, I published a column, I published a column early this week, basically tracking what happened last week before this phone call. Let me see if I can find it here. Yes. Iran, the art of controlling escalation dominance. This column was published, if I'm not mistaken, on Saturday, on Monday, I'm sorry, on Monday on strategic culture. And then I talk about what was happening in terms of American provocations, one after another. And of course, CENTCOM talking about attacks on Iranian radar and command sites, including Qasem Island, CENTCOM terminology, self-defense strikes. And the IRGC Aerospace Force, their response, they targeted a Kuwaiti airbase already. And saying that predicted targets were destroyed and the American regime is lying, usual. So we already starting a very dangerous escalation cycle. So this is what was happening last week before we had this phone call. What the source didn't say is who called whom. For instance, they didn't tell us if Sharif called Pezeshkian or vice versa. But they gave us basically the heart of the matter during the very long, 105 minutes, a very long conversation. So this could be the Iranians trying to tell the mediators, of course, look, we are fed up. That's it. And we've been trying to tell you all the time that we are fed up. We have tried everything diplomatically. The Americans keep changing the rules of the game, and they keep violating the ceasefire. So all that for Iran comes down to the same thing. They are untrustworthy, and it's simple. And they only understand a stark message if we deliver a stark message to them. So obviously, they talk to the mediators and tell the mediators, look, you should tell the White House now that this is our definitive position. And if they don't stop the provocations, that's the third stage of what Pezeshkian said. That if they don't stop the provocations, we are willing to end with our nuclear ambiguity. That's, of course, the ultra bombshell in this phone call. So whatever the response we're going to get from this person, which is very close to Mojtaba Khamenei, and I'm very curious to see what they're going to say, it will probably leave the whole thing open. For instance, he can tell us something that will be extremely plausible in terms of Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei is reviewing Iran's nuclear posture, which is something that is already being discussed in Iran, right? Seriously. These fatwas by Khomeini and Khamenei father, should they be adapted to a new situation where Iran is under existential attack? Quite possible, feasible, logical. And of course, and this would imply Mojtaba Khamenei leaving his mark already defining his legacy. And this is something that can be framed to Iranian public opinion and everybody understand it. Look, we are compelled to do this, otherwise the provocations will never stop, and we're going to enter into a never-ending toxic cycle of American provocations, false flags, trying to implicate us into response. Then we are blamed for our response, and then there are more American attacks, and this ball keeps rolling non-stop. Obviously, the new Iranian leadership doesn't want that. They want for all wars to stop. How do you convince the Americans that all wars should stop? There's no other way, considering their obsession with nuclear weapons. They actually say, look, now we are the new North Korea. You want to come here and attack us? But of course, Nima, you know this better than I do or anybody else. There is the theological aspect of Iran, the Shiite theological aspect of Iran, and Mojtaba will go directly against policies of Khomeini and his dad. So this is the most fateful decision imaginable, right? But I would say that the reality on the ground is forcing a re-study, at least, of Iran's nuclear posture. Because the empire and Israel will never give up, Nima. You know this very well. Everybody in Iran knows this very well. Only if you have deterrence like that. For instance, Iran has other forms of deterrence that they haven't even used that can be even more lethal than holding a nuclear bomb. But they are saving it for the right moment. But they also know that the only language that these obsessive killers understand is okay, if a country has a nuclear weapon, there's nothing we can do about it. The North Korea lesson, right? Compared to the Libya lesson or the Iraq lesson. Well, so that's where we are, Nima. It's serious. It's very complicated.
I think the points that you raised are so important. One of them is that Iran doesn't want to continue with this sort of, because Iran says that, yeah, exactly, with these cycles of attacks, and it's the same strategy as we've seen with the case of Gaza, with the case of Lebanon, continuous war. And that's why I think what the United States is trying to do in the region is the same. They want to continue this sort of conflict, go on and on, fighting, attacking, and this sort. Iran doesn't want this. I can assure everybody that nobody wants this in Iran. They want to put an end to the war permanently. That's why they're so, I think they're so, they know what they want and the outcome. I'm talking about the outcome. But the means could be through talks, negotiation, messages, or war, which nobody believes so far in Iran. Nobody believes that, I'm talking about decision makers, that they can get everything by negotiations. That's why you see the head of the Iranian parliament says that everything going to be decided on the battlefield, then documented on the paper. And this is the first time you see the head of the Iranian parliament talking this way. And he said, who wins the war? The one that is prepared for tomorrow, the day after the deal, the day after the agreement, to fight. And he's talking about basically that there is no talk or negotiation. It's all about fighting on the battlefield. The battlefield would decide about the future of the conflict, of the situation between Iran and the United States. I think that's one point. When it comes to the nuclear program, which is so sensitive, Pepe, so sensitive. Nobody's talking, at the, you look at the mainstream media in Iran, Persian media, they're not talking about it. But what I feel about what's going on with the discussions, with few discussions that are happening in Iran, my understanding is that the new supreme leader of Iran didn't change the policy of his father, which is the previous supreme leader of Iran. This is my understanding. I think they still consider the nuclear bomb as this mass murder of something that Iran at this particular moment doesn't want it. This is my understanding. And with the situation with the war, we know that we had the Israelis are talking about using the nuclear. Even Benjamin Netanyahu said the final solution for Iran. What is that? What does that mean? This is a historical sort of term used by Benjamin Netanyahu. And many people are arguing, what does that mean with the behavior of Israel? And they know that Israel is not going to be able to defeat Iran with the conventional weapons. And these are, as you mentioned, we are witnessing some sort of fluid conditions that as time goes by, everything is so fluid. And we don't know what's going on. With the war in Ukraine was the same, as you mentioned. We started this war. All of us thought that this war going to end in 1 year, then 2 years, then right now we're approaching 5 years of war. This is the strategy of the empire, Pepe. They want to trap Russia. They want to trap Iran in continuous conflict and war.
Absolutely. And so far, they are succeeding. But the Iranians can break the cycle. And they know how to break the cycle, because their response now is going to be, from now on, is going to be unbearable from the other side. There's no other way. It's the right strategy. They have to escalate the tempo. There's no question about that. And of course, the Russians are looking at it and thinking about the same thing. We have to escalate the tempo. And they're fighting. Russia is fighting the whole of the West at the same time. That's quite something. But Iran, they're fighting everything that the empire has thrown against them, and Israel together. The two most. Okay, consider the Israeli army is not exactly on the field. That they don't exist. They are specialized in killing from the air and bombing from the air and killing innocent civilians. But it's still a enormously devastating fighting force. And Iran is fighting against both by itself. It's quite something. But what they managed to do in less than 3 months is already absolutely remarkable. And that explains this feeling of self-confidence. Okay, we are going to achieve what we want, as you said, in the battlefield. And then they're going to have to recognize what we achieved in the battlefield. So the strategic defeat of the US will, for all the world to see effect. No? And brings us to the key point of how can any, irrespective of Trump is a lowly minor character, any president or any leadership in the US simply cannot admit that the empire has been strategically defeated like that by a mid-ranking power under sanctions for 47 years. It is absolutely remarkable, and that's why this war is changing the geopolitics of the 21st century. Much more than these very polite discussions about multipolarity. They have not achieved much so far.
And what's making, Pepe, the situation even worse is the case of Lebanon and Israel. Just moments ago, Iranian foreign minister said Iran's armed forces are ready and willing to resume war against Israel at any moment. If Israel strikes Beirut, Iran will respond. This is not a question if Iran would respond. Iran will respond to Israel if they attack Beirut. Mm-hmm. And I don't see Donald Trump being able to do anything about Israel. And Israel is just getting out of the hand, and they're doing whatever they want to do.
No, it's impossible, Nima. First of all, he doesn't care. Number two, he doesn't care about civilian victims in Gaza or in Lebanon. Second, he wants an off-ramp because he finally realized in his own non-strategic way that he messed up big time. And nobody's going to save him from his decision. He was misled by the leader of that death cult over there. Of course he was. He was sold a quick war that will last a weekend. And now he's in a quagmire with no way out, unless he admits that he was strategically defeated. And that, from an imperial point of view, is when an empire does that, that's it. That's the end of the empire. So what's the most plausible way? What do we have now, which is no war, no peace? And no war, no peace can go on for days, weeks, months. He cannot go through months because he has an election, which, by the way, he already lost the midterms. And he's going to become a lame duck. And he's going to have to live with it. And probably people will go after his throat to impeach him, go after his family, his cronies, etc. He can feel what's ahead. And of course, how can he extract some sort of deal, let's put it this way, that he can sell as a victory, domestically and globally? Impossible. The Iranians will never allow him to do that. And that's the beauty of it. Who holds the cards? Tehran. Who controls the possible escalation or de-escalation? Tehran. Who controls when the war will actually end? Tehran. There you go.
Yeah. Let me read the breaking news here, Pepe.
Yes.
Here is what Iran just announced, that Iranian Navy announced that it targeted a U.S. warship in the Sea of Oman a few hours ago, and they released this footage here, Pepe.
They released the footage because CENTCOM was saying this was not true. So now we have footage.
They released the video that they targeted the American warship in the Sea of Oman, and they have released that to confirm what's going on. I think there are many things, there are many targets that were hit by Iranian missiles and drones in Kuwait, in Bahrain,
exactly.
in UAE, I would say, that we are not aware of because they have full censorship in these countries.
And of course, U.S. Navy vessels somewhere in the Sea of Oman. No question. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to find it here. Yeah, right. Yeah. So we are back to provocation, escalation, and response. And the Iranian response is going to, from now on, is going to be much more hardcore. And when they say that, they follow it. It's not an empty threat.
Pepe, the other point, the other dimension before wrapping up this session, I think, is what's going on between Iran and China. We know how deep is the relationship between Iran and Russia, but it's getting the same with Iran and China as time goes by. And as Ghalibaf, the head of Iranian parliament, is responsible for the new connection between Iran and China, and the way they're deepening the relationship.
They're deepening the strategic partnership. Absolutely. Yeah. This is immensely significant because he's arguably the most, I wouldn't say competent, but the best prepared member of this new governing setup. And it's not an accident that they give him this super strategic post, in fact, as the coordinator of the strategic partnership with China. And in the larger picture of this China, Pakistan, Iran alignment, to try to find some sort of accommodation with the empire running out of control. Of course, the Chinese know very well that this is a war against them as well. And they are the main target of the Americans. They know everything. Is this, you're showing, I thought you were showing the missile again.
Yeah. No, this is the article in the Cradle today.
On the Cradle, yeah. Principal strategic partner. There's no question about that. The number one strategic partner for Iran is China. It's not Russia. It's China. No question about that. And it's part of according to our source, what Dar, the foreign minister of Pakistan, put it to Rubio. Look, the Chinese are actually helping Iran with high-tech military materials. And there's nothing you can do about it, or any of us. It's part of their strategic partnership. They don't expect the Chinese to announce that or to admit it officially. It's not how it works in China. This is all made very discreetly through third countries, always. So China always has plausible deniability. So all of that stuff is going through Southeast Asia, Kazakhstan. There are many possibilities. Never tracked directly to China. And discussions with Chinese scholars, for instance, they are paying, sorry, Nima. They're paying a lot of attention to Iran. When you look at the best analytical articles in in some of Chinese media, not regulated by Beijing. Most of them are connected to Iran, and they rarely talk about Ukraine, because now they are concentrated especially on the EU and this new stupidity, but beyond anything imaginable coming from the EU, that they want to criminalize Chinese overproduction. How can you be so stupid? The Europeans are incapable of producing stuff that other people want to buy, but the Chinese produce stuff that the whole planet wants to buy. So now they're going to be criminalized by it, by the Europeans. It's beyond stupid. So obviously the discussion in Chinese media is about that. So they barely talk about the war in Ukraine. But Iran, oh yes, and there's some very, very good analysis. And they respect the fact that Iran is a key strategic partner for China in West Asia, although they have close relations with almost everybody. The Chinese way, right? They do business with everybody. But in terms of strategic and pinpointed anchor of a post-American West Asia, the Chinese are betting everything on Iran, no question.
The world is changing, Pepe, drastically.
Like Xi Jinping told Vladimir Putin, Nima.
Yeah, exactly.
He told it was in 2023 and only a few days ago in Beijing.
Yeah. Obrigado, Pepe.
Obrigado a você. Thank you. Opa, meia-noite. Daqui a pouco.
Vai ter que dormir, mas.
Eu vou dormir 2, 3 horas e aí acordar e ir para o aeroporto.
Exatamente. Boa viagem aí, Pepe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Next week we talk about what happened in St. Petersburg.
Sure. And see you soon, Pepe. See you soon.
See you soon, Nima. All the best. All the best to all of you, our audience. And thank you for being so patient, following one of the most demented stories of forever. And now with this twist, let's see what's inside this information that we receive. We'll go back to it next week as well. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daniel Davis Deep Dive Roadshow edition. We are in Tbilisi, Georgia today, where I'm here for a conference that I'm going to be speaking at here shortly with some foreign policy folks from around the world, actually. But a lot of things have been going on, and I don't want to leave you in the dark. First question, the operative thing today, in terms of our Iran possibility and strategies, what is the plan? What are we doing to accomplish the plan? And who's actually in charge? The last couple of days, President Trump has been answering some questions about how this is going, what he's actually doing to accomplish this. And well, let's just say it's a little bit disjointed.
Is the ceasefire with Iran still on?
Well, there's a reason for everything. And we hit them pretty hard the night before and actually last night. And when it was explained to me, I said, all right, so we'll do that. But we've been hitting them pretty hard a little bit. So there is a reason for certain things, and there's usually a reason that sometimes makes sense. But they did something, not a big deal. We got it. We nipped it in the bud very quickly, as we do. We're the greatest military in the world. But some people would say they were slightly provoked because we took a strong action for a different reason. So they were reciprocating. Yep.
Can you explain?
I hear the negotiation itself has gone very well, actually. Very well.
Mr. President,
It could happen. I mean, if it happens, and it might not happen, who knows? But if it happens, it could happen like over the weekend.
Yeah, it might not happen. I mean, who knows? Obviously not him. Okay, as a quick recap, we are in this war right now. We're in a ceasefire period, which President Trump himself sought and went after so that we could negotiate an end to this. And yet in this latest dust up here that happened just in the last couple of days, the United States hit Iran, and then Iran fired back, and they hit some targets in Kuwait, and we struck on Qasem Island, etc. There's some question about who fired first. Now, we were all thinking, okay, well, probably he's going to say, oh, no, our fire was all defensive in nature. They hit us, and so we struck back. And then here President Trump actually admits, no, we initiated this. We struck targets on Qasem Island. We struck a ship. Disabled it, which is, again, kind of ironic because here just days ago we were explaining how Iran, when they had struck ships, how illegal and unauthorized that was. And yet here we go again. Certainly not the first time we've done that, but there it is. So he's saying that. But then let's get to the more fundamental issue here. You're trying to have a negotiated and he says in that clip right there, oh no, the negotiations are going fine. They are definitely not going fine. And how are you going to accomplish a negotiated end when you have worked out a ceasefire that both sides are largely holding to, unless we're the one that initiates it, while you're saying we want to end the war? What sense does that make? What are we going to gain by hitting a couple of targets on Qasem Island or a ship or anything else when we're trying to reach a negotiated end to the war? These things don't make any sense, and they're literally not just mutually exclusive, but they're contradictory to one another. It almost guarantees that we won't make it. And of course, that's just the one issue there. The bigger issue is Lebanon, which we're going to get to in just a second. But let's take a look at one of the other things President Trump said today, because unfortunately the contradictory things and the things that make you shake your head and say, wait, what?
Anything can happen, when you're dealing with Iran, but when you're dealing with other countries. But that's a very volatile part of the world, probably the most volatile part of the world. The people are volatile, the leadership, you see what's going on. We've gone through 3 teams of leadership. It's been we're military. There's never been a military like what we have. We could go another 2-3 weeks and just wipe everybody out. I'd rather not do that. Very easy to do. They're ready to do it. They want to do it. But if we can get something down in writing which will accomplish the same thing without killing everybody, I'd like to do that. Most of my people, I think, would like to do that.
They're begging us for a deal. They want a deal. All they are is telling us, oh, wait a minute. They suspended talks with the United States over the attacks in Lebanon on June the 1st. So what is he even talking about? Who is this mythical person he keeps talking about dealing with? And I'm going to show you some more comments from the Iranian side, as I always do, on this, so you see what both sides are saying. And they have been saying, as I've been putting on this show all the time, that they're not talking to us right now. There's maybe some intermediaries, some notes being passed, but they're passing the notes that say, if you surrender to us, sure, we'll have negotiated in. So when President Trump keeps this fiction going that we're processing and we're going down the road and whatever, and then this, these claims, like he just did here, that we have the most incredible military and we can knock anything out and we can destroy them. And maybe just another 2-3 weeks. That's it, just 2-3 weeks and we'll just completely destroy him. And apparently just out of the goodness of his heart, he's saying, hey, how's about y'all just submit to us and you surrender to us instead? And as a matter of fact, we keep talking all about, he keeps talking about how great our military is and how we can just finish this whole thing up in 2 or 3 weeks, no problem. I don't know why we stopped in the first place after the first 40 days, but hey, 2-3 more weeks and we'll back it out, because after all, we have the most incredible military in the history of the world. Now, in this current situation here, where we struck Qasem Island in this vessel in the sea, and then Iran retaliated and hit Kuwait, Central Command initially, like in the first few minutes, published something that says, oh, you know what? We intercepted every missile. Nothing got through. I'm going to show you this video here. This is from Kuwait. When this is what we claim that knocked down. So we knocked down all their missiles, all their drones, right? Here's a video of the airport in Kuwait. I don't see, oh, wait a minute. There is the drone that goes straight in and hits the airport. I think there's a couple of angles on the inside here subsequent to that. But, the one thing that really stands out, there's, these use that Shahed drone comes crashing in. And what you see in that is that there was no interception. There was no air defense missiles going up. There was no anti-drone system in place in broad daylight. So whatever President Trump wants to say, this is probably going to work on some of his supporters because they don't see these kinds of things. They just hear his words and then they take them at face value with never checking anything. But here's who doesn't take it at face value: anyone else in the world. Iran doesn't take it at face value. They mock him. They laugh at him. And it gives them more strength and more courage and emboldened to stand further against him because they see the guy's detached from reality. And then who else does it is any of our other adversaries, because they're saying, hang on, this is the best you can do. And I'm even talking about our allies in the region. What do you think Kuwait is thinking today? After all that's happened, after all that's been going on here, we have this happen, and knowing that things are going to happen, knowing that there's going to be more attacks, trying to rebuild our defenses, and yet here is a Shahed drone, and those things fly relatively slow, in broad daylight, slams into the airport, exposing that we are not the most incredible military in the history of the world, and we can't protect anyone. So this just shows more and more of our weakness and how we are falling further and further behind, and then making any kind of negotiated end to this go even further distance unless it's submission to what the Iranian terms are, which have not changed. And they're continuing to go down that path. Well, President Trump also talked about what would happen if we did go back to bombing. He was asked that on another interview here. And they said, hey, if we go back to bombing, how's this going to work? So on the heels of him saying we're the most powerful and incredible military on the planet, he said this in a separate interview also, I believe it was yesterday, on podcast, Pod One America, I think it's called, Pod Force One. He said, hey, you know what? We could take this out. It's not going to be hard at all.
Now I have to make a determination. Do we sign a deal or we do it the other way? And the other way is not nice.
What will the other way achieve, though?
Certainty. It would be over. There wouldn't be any bullshit. There wouldn't be any talking. There wouldn't be any delays. There wouldn't. But I'd rather do it the nice way, from a humanitarian standpoint.
Can you do it just with bombing? The other way?
You don't have to. We don't need boots on the ground now. Well, we did it. We wiped out much of their military with just bombing. We can put anybody on the ground. You don't want to do that. You're so far away.
Okay, yeah, we can just bomb them into submission, no problem. 2 or 3 weeks, we can knock them out. And she's even asking, can you do this without boots on the ground? Can you do it without a ground army in a country as big as Western Europe? Yeah, sure. We did it before. We can do it again. You tried it before. You didn't do it before. And you have exposed what everyone already knew that paid attention through the last 100 years of physical experience. You cannot bomb a nation into submission just from the air. It just doesn't work. And yet here he is saying over and over, oh yeah, we'll just do that. Again, this, you cannot imagine how much aid and comfort this gives to our adversary in Iran, because they know the truth. They see these things. They know what their country looks like. They know what we couldn't take out. They know what the terrain is like and how there is no military solution, definitely not on the ground. But because of this terrain and because of these facilities, doing it from the air won't work. And how many times do we have to validate that by physically proving it? And when the commander-in-chief of our armed forces makes these absurd claims and the Iranian side sits back and look at it, and they're like, dude, are you serious? This is the best you got? You're just going to waste more of your very critically important, expensive, and limited strike capabilities with JASSMs and Tomahawk cruise missiles, the bunker busters. You want to use all that on a target that you can't defeat? I mean, they're saying, I guess if you need to do that, go ahead, but then we're going to be hitting targets like we just showed we can hit, and we can destroy people that matter to you. And if we can hit that pinpoint strike like we did on the Kuwaiti airport, guess what else we can hit with pinpoint accuracy? Every oil facility, every pumping station, pipelines, oil, water desalination plants, etc. You name it. Whatever they want to hit, they will hit. So while President Trump is talking nonsense, the Iranians are demonstrating physical capacity to make good on their threat, that this is not all they can do. We have shown all we can do, and we can't do anything more. They have demonstrated that they can ramp this up and hit much more important targets, not stuff that's buried under a mountainside, but stuff that's right out in the open that can't be protected. That is what is so important to understand here. President Trump is leading us towards a cliff. And if we don't put the brakes on pretty quick, we're going to roll right off the edge of it. And if this gets back into a conflict, what I just described to you is what you will see. We will fire a bunch more bombs, and we'll blow up a bunch of buildings and kill a bunch more people in Iran and hurt them, especially economic realm or whatever. We'll hit some of their oil infrastructure, which perversely will actually worsen the global energy industry. But that's fine. We can do that because a lot of those things aren't underground. So they are targets that can be hit, and it will definitely hurt them. But the ones that they'll fire back in response will destroy our economy and will devastate the global energy system, because it will make, on a relative permanent basis for an extended period of time, the shortfall that you'll drain all your SPRs and other storage facilities, and then you are in a world of hurt because now you also don't have any strategic reserve. It's literally the worst of all worlds. And that's what we are racing to, because President Trump won't see the light. He won't see common sense. He won't see physical manifestation of the reality of what we're talking about here. And one has to wonder at some point, is anybody else going to wake up in America? Is anybody else going to say, listen, we can't do this, Mr. President? This is literally leading us to a physical loss. We walked away from Vietnam. We walked away from Afghanistan. They were strategic losses without question. But we never suffered a physical military defeat. We just suffered a strategic one, and we could just walk away at a time of our choosing, which is why I've been advocating the walkaway plan from the beginning. But you go down this path, and then we may suffer the strategic loss that's already baked in, and add to it a military defeat. Because when everybody in the world sees that you can't protect anybody, you can't protect your own bases, you can't protect your allies' bases, and you can't protect energy systems upon which the whole world economy depends, we will be through. Europe will abandon us. Asia will abandon us. Our adversaries everywhere will be emboldened. That's not to say that everybody's going to launch a war everywhere, because that's, as I say all the time, what happens in one place doesn't automatically trigger something elsewhere, because that depends on the conditions that exist elsewhere. So like China and Taiwan, for example, it's not to say they're going to launch on Taiwan, because there's a lot of other things that go into that. China doesn't want a war over there. So they're not going to take advantage of this, because that's not the outcome they want. They may use this by encouraging Taiwan to say, hey, maybe now would be a good time to have a good diplomatic and political union of some sort, because you see that if you're relying on that, you're going to be a smoldering rubble like Kuwait. So in that sense, it could help out, but that doesn't necessarily mean war, but it does mean the continuing diminution and the reduction of our capability and our reputation and credibility everywhere, and therefore our ability to do anything. Because that also has obviously significant ramifications to our global economy and our position around the world, the power of the dollar, et cetera. Every bit of that could come crashing down if we go down this bad path. That's what's at stake here, folks. This is way more important now than what happens in Iran. We're now fighting for our survival as any kind of credibility on a global power that we have been. It's already badly damaged, but it's not destroyed. There's still a way to salvage it if we don't go down this path. That's what's important to know. We have to make sure that we don't do anything more foolish than what we've done already. Well, that's our show for today.
A new round of escalation has been recorded in the Middle East, as the U.S. launched an aggressive attack on Iran. Then both sides exchanged strikes throughout the night of June 3, 2026, with IRGC missiles and drones striking U.S. facilities in Kuwait and Bahrain. The IRGC Public Relations Office stated that the U.S. acted first under the pretext of self-defense, disabling the oil tanker Mount Lexi, which was heading toward Karg Island, Iran. Conversely, U.S. Central Command reported that an operation was conducted in international waters to stop the oil tanker. According to the U.S. Central Command, AGM-114 Hellfire missiles were used against the vessel, causing the tanker to lose propulsion. Subsequently, U.S. forces in a new airstrike also attacked a telecommunications tower south of Keshem Island, which IRGC says was used for communication purposes. Sharp condemnation followed the aggression. The Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Wednesday strongly condemned the actions of the U.S. military, emphasizing that they not only violated the ceasefire agreement, but also constituted a grave breach of the UN Charter and the norms of international law. As a harsher response is promised to the attack, in which U.S. air bases and helicopters arriving from two Gulf nations, Kuwait and Bahrain, were subsequently subjected to an all-out assault involving the launch of several ballistic missiles and drones by the IRGC Aerospace Force. According to Iranian sources, IRGC units retaliated on three fronts. First, the container ship MSC Panaya was disabled off the coast of Bahrain. According to reports, the ship is owned by the Aponti family, which has close ties to President Trump. In Kuwait, the U.S. airbase was targeted by Iranian projectiles, with massive explosions and warning sirens echoing across the small country. Particular attention was drawn to a video showing a Kuwaiti man and his companion getting into an accident while trying to watch the approaching Iranian missiles. Their car crashed into a road barrier, but fortunately, they were not seriously injured. According to CENTCOM, that the Iranian missiles missed their targets, but in fact a Patriot interceptor missile failed to perform its task in intercepting a ballistic missile, crashing within the city border of Kuwait. After launch, Patriot demonstrated performance that endangered civilians, as confirmed in the footage. Satellite imagery taken today confirms the destruction of a hangar specifically for U.S. drones and military aircraft at Ali Al Salem Air Base, following Iranian response to the base. Additionally, damage was recorded at Kuwait International Airport due to a drone attack reportedly from an unknown source. Civilian firefighting teams failed to extinguish the raging fire, and documentation shows the resulting damage. In Bahrain, footage reportedly captures the moment an IRGC Aerospace Force missile struck a support facility for U.S. Navy 5th Fleet headquarters amid rising tensions. But the footage and details of the attack have not yet been independently verified. Once again, IRGC issued a warning, stating that the response will be different and harsher. This must serve as a lesson. We reiterate that any security disruption in the Strait of Hormuz will have serious consequences for the aggressive U.S. military.
Well, overnight, Iran launched a series of devastating attacks on Gulf countries. Iran is targeting U.S. bases in multiple countries, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Iraq, following U.S. attacks on Qasem Island. By the way, Iran said that they were going to retaliate last week, and they did. But according to U.S. CENTCOM, says that every Iranian missile was stopped in its tracks. In other words, shot down. And then daylight hit, and suddenly, shocker, CENTCOM was lying to us. Iranian missiles struck targets all over the region, and video are now emerging as a result of that. Here's Kuwait. That's the Kuwait International Airport. And there are some daylight photos that have also emerged as well, which you can see. And so then once we get satellite imagery, according to Egypt's Intel Observer, fresh satellite imagery confirms the destruction of drone aircraft shelters located within the airbase in Kuwait following this Iranian missile strike. So CENTCOM stopped all of the missiles? Okay. According to Max Blumenthal, a friend of the show over the Gray Zone, said Iran is targeting these bases. Iran seems to have recognized that deterrence can only be established by forcing the U.S. regime, the mafia co-opted by Greater Israel, to recognize every terrorist action has a cost. Meanwhile, we are seeing, obviously, a worsening economy in the United States, and you can draw a direct line between the start of the Iranian war and rising interest rates, rising gas prices, rising food costs all across the United States. According to a new study this morning, new data this morning, most voters believe the U.S. economy has gotten worse since last year, but they're divided over which party can do a better job of handling it. Here's a little insight. They're both in on this together. They both love war. Both of these parties are massively corrupt, and they both, of course, want this war, and they'll do whatever they can to support the military-industrial complex. Professor Robert Pape is back with us, author of The Escalation Trap, and what he writes about, of course, on his Substack is exactly what we're seeing here. So, Professor, maybe you can analyze for us where we sit right now. Iran seems to be done with any sort of negotiations at this point. They're not playing, according to sources in Iran, saying we're not playing this tit for tat anymore, and we're going to carry out these attacks on our own terms. We're not waiting for Trump to come back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. We're done. What do you make of that?
What I think is that Iran recognizes that the more the war has gone on, the more leverage is going to its side, and it's playing that hand as strongly as I think we could imagine. It's not succumbing, it's not buckling. This idea that because of X, Y, or Z economic costs on the Iranian economy because of the blockade, the whole house of cards is coming unglued, and the regime is about to topple and be coerced. There's no signs of this, and there's no reason to think that that's going to happen. And in fact, what's happening is we're underestimating how much more this is going to escalate. You're run into this. To the segment here really covers the core issues here. We are essentially now in the last few weeks been bombing while negotiating. So the last night was not the first set of tit for tat attacks. This has been going on for a while. Both sides have been doing what I call demonstration attacks here. These are kind of attacks to show resolve, that they're not going to be cowed or moved in the negotiations. They also want to sort of send a little demonstration to their other audiences, domestic and international, that they're not buckling. But now what you see is that they're escalating. It's really, I think, quite sad and counterproductive for CENTCOM to be putting out essentially victory rhetoric when this is going to be easily discovered here. And you just showed it within hours. You're able to show that was not the case. And what that does is it disillusions supporters on their own side here. So they might think putting out this rhetoric is a good idea, but over time, it tends to be counterproductive, even for their own supporters, because people just see it with their own eyes. I'm sorry to say that I'm expecting there will be more escalation as time goes on, and specifically even for what happened against Kuwait, because the idea that you're going to let these videos get out, you're going to see all that damage, and the United States is just going to sit on its hands. Well, President Trump looks weak, and we know President Trump does not like to look weak.
Right. This was my thought too. Isn't there a consequence to putting out lies like this? You can just say, nope, that didn't happen. absolutely not. Some people will buy it and be like, oh, okay, that's the official government line. But the rest of them will just start to realize they're lying, and they keep lying. And is there any consequence for them to be lying to us with our own money that they're operating? I just can't get over it.
Yes, it builds. This is one of the problems we had in Vietnam. Here, it's a little bit like a bubble in the stock market, where it seems as if you can go for quite some time. But the problem is you have basically people are just kind of mouthing the words of support, knowing that there's a hollowness to it, and what that does is it builds up over time. And this is what we've seen in other conflicts, and it really then helps, it creates a moment of bursting of balloons. So the danger here is not so much that President Trump will go down in the approval ratings like on a day-by-day basis. So if you're looking for, oh, we're going to track this in the White House, or how is this rhetoric tracking for President Trump on a day-by-day basis? The bigger problem is, and we saw this in Vietnam when the bad guys, the Viet Cong, did this offensive called the Tet Offensive, is they did something more spectacular, which put a lie to the Pentagon's PR. And that created a bursting of a balloon moment at a certain point in the war. And that is when you couldn't stop. It was like a bursting of a dam. So that's more the risk here. And that's maybe why they don't quite see it, because they're probably tracking his PR teams. That's the White House communications are probably tracking his support on all these polls day by day by day. But what they probably can't see coming is the balloon that could possibly burst.
What does this escalation look like financially for the American people, and then, of course, militarily for the United States military? We saw, of course, over the past few days, there seems to be pretty high tensions between President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. That phone call leaked, maybe intentionally, it seems probably intentionally, to show that I called him crazy. I called Netanyahu crazy. What the hell are you doing in Lebanon? You'd be in jail if it wasn't for me. And then people thought maybe this phone call was fake. Then Trump confirmed it in an interview to the New York Post. Yes, I did say those things. So this seems like it was intentional to get out there.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Well, first of all, a lot of what President Trump says, he's not hiding. He tells you a lot of what he thinks. So the second thing I would say is that I think this is pretty strong evidence. He knows he's in an escalation trap. He's doing his best to wiggle out of the trap. He's doing everything. I think he's trying to do it quickly, which is a problem, because I don't think that's possible. But nonetheless, that's what he's trying to do. And Netanyahu is just getting in his way. And Netanyahu is the one who suckered him into this in the first place. He probably, this was not a good thing to have done. He keeps saying it is, but I think realize it's not. And so Netanyahu was a big part of the reason he did it. So no wonder he's blowing up at Netanyahu.
And so you've been reporting about the oil shortage and how that is going to have a cascading effect on our economy, our ability to buy supplies, our ability to use the US dollar as it continues to be devalued. It seems like voters understand that. A new poll from Rasmussen, sorry. Rasmussen was a different thing altogether. Says that 58% of Americans say the economy's gotten worse and they don't expect it to get any better. And so I guess we need to just continue to plan for what is the inevitable. Can you play that out for us?
Yes. Well, and so this comes from my study of blockades and so forth. And we're going through a process here that I have laid out on the Substacks. And we're now in the stage. Oh, I'm sorry. We're now in the stage where we haven't quite gotten to the contraction of actual economic activity yet. That is coming, but we're in the shortage stage, and that's where the inventories are being drawn down. And more and more as time goes on, this unfortunately is going to start to create something of panic, because the inventories are not going to last forever. And in fact, you can see them running out sometime in the middle of July, which means much like the crises we've had in the past, say that the no doc crisis with the housing, there will come a point here where everybody realizes this is actually going to be a crisis. And when everybody realizes it all at the same time, that's the really dangerous point. And that could well come here. I'm expecting something like that in June, before June is over. But we know that those inventories are running out by the middle of July, and that is going to be the real problem, because it would take months and months and months here of time before you could ever recover from those inventories being drawn down that far. So this is a known risk. The financial folks here, like Exxon, others, you're hearing the very, people right on the top of it are starting to talk about it. I think a lot of people just don't want to talk about it yet, because much like the no doc crisis here that we saw in fall 2007, people kept saying, yeah, it's happening, but it's going to get better. We'll wiggle our way out of it. Well, we didn't wiggle our way out of that one, and I don't see how we're wiggling out of this one here. And if somebody has a way to refill those inventories, just let us know.
I know.
Well, right. I'm sorry. The president posted it on social media. It's all going to be okay in the end. That's not strategy. That's like, what is the end? Are we all dead in the end?
Well, that's right.
Probably the least comforting
glorious outcome. But again, I guess I've lived through a number of these. And the reason I liken it to that no doc crisis is I clearly remember in August of 2007, almost identical rhetoric coming out of the Bush administration here. And then by October, it didn't matter, because there was a wall that was hit. And so you have a story here, which is people are saying, not a problem. We got plenty of issues. It's like when we say, oh, the junk bonds weren't all that big a deal in August 2007. And then suddenly they are a big deal, because you know what? They are a big deal. So it's just not true. And if there's a real solution, let's start to hear them, as opposed to, don't worry, there's not a problem.
I don't understand. I mean, I can't wrap my head around. I've heard not just from you, but other experts we've had on the show that are predicting right around the 250th anniversary of the country by July 4th. Like this, right. Forgive my French, Lafayette, but that's when the shit's going to hit the fan. Right around our 250th anniversary. And you're hearing you mentioned Exxon, you mentioned these other CEOs, they're telling us we're approaching tank bottoms. We've tapped out our strategic petroleum reserves or dwindled them down. Like, where is this magic oil going to come from?
Well, and so some of the argument that you're hearing here, that just to put it on the other side, they're saying, well, that's all true, but it'll really hurt us more in August than in early July. Okay. And there is truth to that. Okay. So don't think that sequencing it's true. But where the problem here is that when those oil inventories draw down, the places, and that's true globally, the places that will get hurt the worst will be the poorest countries first, and they're already starting to suffer now. They will get hurt the most here, because they have less money to pay for what's remaining. However, we're also going to be facing the consequences. It's not just running out the price of diesel going up. It's as the rest of the world, like say the textile, most of the clothes in the United States are not made in the United States. They're made around the world in very poor countries. Once they run out, once they start to contract here, that's going to shoot up the prices here for things like clothing, things that we're not even talking about right now. So these issues here have knock-on effects that are known. We know they're coming. We can almost lay out the sequence, pretty clearly here about how this time bomb unfolds. The problem is we're not hearing the solutions on the other side. The big solutions that people send me in my Substack here is, well, we're going to end the war. President Trump will just end the war, and this is all going to be over because he said the war is going to be over. Well, that's been going on for 3 months.
Right. Yeah. Right. And there doesn't seem to be an end to it at all.
Well, it's not real. I mean, I'm just saying, if there's a reality here, right. This is the problem. Remember how I used to talk about victory rhetoric meets escalation reality. Well, we're seeing the same sort of thing here.
Yeah.
And the problem is you can only run the rhetoric so far. However, I just want to point out other administrations have done very similar things. You'll recall, I just talked about the Bush administration, the no-doc crisis. You'll recall Biden kept trying to tell you there's not really an inflation problem. I mean, we actually see this all the time, but it doesn't actually stop the problem.
Right. Professor Robert Pape, you got to follow his Substack, The Escalation Trap, and look for that big report that he's
Who is in charge of America's foreign policy? Who is actually running the show? And what is our objectives? Now, you may think, well, we're focused on winning the war. We have to win the war because that's what we're doing. You fight a war, you win a war. I mean, that's the whole point. Is it right? Is it though? Now, what happens when you are fighting a war, but you have demonstrated that you can't militarily win it? You have tried to get a negotiated settlement. Now the other side is not willing to submit because they have shown that they can withstand your military stuff and that they can endure your blockades and the other economic warfare you've been putting on, just like the Russians did and have for, well, not just 4.5 years, but going back to 2014 and even beyond that too. So that didn't work either. Well, then what is the focus? It's not what you may think, at least not in the mind of President Trump. But let's get to the first question first about who's actually in charge. Now, you may recall that when this ceasefire that we're currently in went into effect after the first 40 days of warfare, is that it was contingent upon a ceasefire everywhere, according to both the U.S., Pakistan, and Iranian side, which meant Lebanon. So the Israeli side had been in a fight. They invaded them, I think it was March 19th, into southern Lebanon. They've been firing into Beirut and all kinds of other places, just wreaking unbelievable devastation in that country. So Iran said, look, we want to end this war. It's got to be both or none. That's kind of how it works. And then, of course, the Israeli side had this, when this first ceasefire was announced, they went into an even bigger strike against Lebanon, bigger than it had ever been before. It's kind of an in-your-face repudiation of what President Trump said. Then eventually they kind of got them just in a quasi sort of ceasefire, but not really, at least not a full one. They said, all right, we'll take Beirut off the table, but we're going to keep going. In southern Lebanon, and the Iranian side said, it's all or nothing. So just dancing around the edges doesn't make any difference. Either you're all in or you're all out. That's the only thing. And if you're any in, we're going to remain out. That's just how it works. Well, then we got into a bit of a head at the first of this month. On June the 1st, you may recall that President Trump put this on Truth Social and said, I had a very productive call with Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, and there will be no troops going into Beirut, and any troops that are on the way have already been turned back. Likewise, through highly placed representatives, I had a very good call with Hezbollah, and they agreed to stop shooting as well. That Israel will not attack them and they will not attack Israel. Okay, terrific. And then he says, I think just a little bit later, just 20 or so minutes later, he says, talks are continuing with Iran at a rapid pace with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Thank you for attention to this matter stuff. And then we had, I think right on the same day, again, a finger in the eye to Trump, where Lebanon troops unravels as Netanyahu and his defense minister instruct the IDF to renew Hezbollah strikes in Beirut specifically. So he goes into the heart of the matter. And again, we have to say, who's actually in charge here? And then this is from yesterday and then this morning. You see, Israel attacks kill 9 in Lebanon, reach Beirut outskirts yesterday. And then here this morning, you have Israel, Lebanon agree to renew truce to create a pilot zone where Hezbollah is banned. This is utterly meaningless. This is a headline designed for American public to say, oh, well, President Trump is having some influence. See, look, he's now done something. He hasn't done, Netanyahu hasn't done anything. You can see it in this small print there. It says the sides agreed to ceasefire relies on a halt to Hezbollah activity, but you're not stopping your attacks on Hezbollah itself. And therefore, there's not going to be any problem. And to talk to the government of Lebanon when they're clearly not in charge of Hezbollah is meaningless, and everybody knows it. They especially know it. And so when they claim that they're looking for a pilot zone where there can be a ceasefire, it's either a ceasefire or it's not. This pilot zone, that is complete BS. And it's time for us to stop letting these wordsmithing things have any sway. Either Netanyahu's going to do what President Trump tells him, or President Trump should walk away. But President Trump has no backbone for that. I keep saying if he gets one, he's clearly not going to. And it's time for us to just admit it. President Trump is not in charge of anything. And so you see, of course, this is just earlier this morning. See, Hezbollah said it carried out 17 military operations against Israeli forces on Wednesday, citing continued Israeli attacks on civilians and repeated violations of the ceasefire. So Israel attacks Hezbollah in Lebanon and in Beirut and short of Beirut, et cetera. And then Iran, as Hezbollah responds. And then, of course, everybody in the Western media and the Israeli media says, look at those guys. See, how can we not defend ourselves? They intentionally provoke a strike like the U.S. did to Iran, weirdly enough. And when you get that response back, then people want to say, look at the other side. This is all a performative act, folks. It's fake news. That's not even fake news. That's the wrong term. It's deception. It's disinformation to try and manipulate you, the American viewer especially, and European ones as well, to make you believe something that isn't true, that we're trying to get to a ceasefire. We're trying to, in this, there's no truth to that whatsoever. This is definitely us trying to, or Israel trying to say, we're going to conquer Lebanon to whatever extent that we want. I don't care what the U.S. says. I don't care what Trump himself says. I don't care about any of that. That's where we are, folks. And you may recall what prompted a lot of that. There was a couple of days, I guess 1 or 2 days after that first Truth Social I showed you, this big news that came out in Axios that Trump did get on the phone with Netanyahu and just had this big explosion and, used a lot of curse words and whatever. Obviously, it had no physical evidence at all. So you can see just from the physical results, if that conversation ever actually happened, and that is very much in dispute. I don't know. I'm very skeptical that it actually did. It's possible. I definitely can see two guys like that getting on a phone call and having a lot of profanity going back and forth. But the question is and remains and has always been, what happens on the ground as a result of these conversations? Who is running the show? I don't care what anybody puts in a Truth Social. I don't care what they put in an interview. The only thing that matters is on the ground. And what is we seen on the ground, as we see today, is Israel's continuing to attack into Lebanon. So they don't want a negotiated settlement. They're going to do whatever they can to make sure they sabotage one of the central reasons for it. Now, let me show you also, speaking of an interview, because words do have some matter, so you got to pay attention to what people say. And this is what Benjamin Netanyahu said on an interview specifically regarding the claim of this argument.
So let's talk about the call that you had with him this week, which is getting a lot of attention. President confirmed that he said, "You're effing crazy." How did you react to that? What really happened in that call?
Well, I'm not going to get into details of our conversations. We've had thousands, a lot of them. And if you think this is a crisis, you should be in some other conversations. But we've always found a way. We have so many agreements. We agree on the main things. We want to get Iran, the nuclear program in Iran, finished. We want to make sure that Iran doesn't pose a threat to Israel, to the Middle East, to America, that it doesn't develop nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them, not only to Israel and to every capital in Europe, but into every city in the United States. That's our common goal. That's what we set out to do. And to expand the circle of peace, as the president and I did in the Abraham Accords together. So we have common goals. Sometimes we have, as in the best of families, you have these tactical disagreements. We always find a way to work them out. And we do so as great friends. We can disagree in the morning, and by the afternoon, we're common action.
Okay, that's the key part there. And by the afternoon, we have common action. And when that action is what you just saw, Israeli attacks into Lebanon, Israeli attacks against Hezbollah, there is your answer of who is in charge. Straight from the mouth of Benjamin Netanyahu, straight from the battlefield in Lebanon. Those things finally align. So it doesn't matter what President Trump says, it only matters what's actually happening. And so there you have it. President Trump can say that we had a great call, whatever we want. He can say I had a great call with Hezbollah. Obviously, neither of those had any influence at all on what's going on the ground. Meanwhile, when Benjamin Netanyahu says something, what he says does manifest on the ground in these attacks. So there's no conclusion to reach. It's right there in your face to anyone willing to see it. President Trump is not calling the shots. Netanyahu is, and President Trump will not use any of his leverage or any of his power to stop him, even though he has it, because he doesn't want to or he's afraid of him. I don't know which it is. All I can tell you for a guaranteed fact is it's not happening. And it's even worse than that. You may have seen there's been some news out here in the last few days that in the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA for 2027, that there was quite an effort in Congress, bipartisan, to move some money into a certain program to fuse, in certain regards, American and Israeli militaries. Fuse them in many important ways to make them almost inseparable, which they have been in practice since this war started. But now then there's a move that's not enough. And this war is not enough. We want to make it like the U.S. armed forces are the forces of Israel. And that Netanyahu has access to and deployment capabilities on our armed forces, which he has several times, going back to 2024 as well, even under the Biden administration. It's escalated here. And now then they're trying to codify it, make it into law. Now, what do you think the chances are that the American Congress, which is massively supported by Israeli money and AIPAC and lobbies and all the kinds of stuff to that, massively, what do you think the chances are that they're not going to push this through, even though the likes of Thomas Massey and a handful of Rokon and a couple of others are pushing back on this? Good on them. I'm all for what they're doing, but they're limited in their numbers. The vast numbers, they just have the numbers and they can push this stuff through there. And Benjamin Netanyahu was actually asked about that too. And he was really excited about talking about that.
We appreciate it. I appreciate every amount of help that America has given us over the years. But I think just as we moved away from financial aid, economic aid, we can move away now from military aid and move to a partnership. And that's going to happen.
Move to a partnership? Are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? What country on this planet could be talking about having a physical partnership? I'm talking about legislatively so, budget-wise so, with the United States Armed Forces. Not that we'll give money. See, you see what he's saying there is that, hey, we don't need to have all this money we get from the U.S. every year, because they know that's a sore spot. That's causing a lot of friction with the American population, because you're going, why do we keep giving what it used to be $3.8 billion a year? It's massively more than that since 2023. But he's been saying of like, you know what? I think that we should move away from that. And people go, okay, well, cool. They're not going to take our money. No, that's not true. He's just intelligent. And so he's working with his agents in the U.S. Congress and apparently in the White House to say, how's about we actually put this into a place where it's part of your budget? Then we don't have to worry about getting certain money because we're actually one and the same. Good on Thomas Massey for going against this, but man, this should rile up every American. Hey, you want to be friends with Israel? Fine, be friends with Israel. Be friends with Great Britain. Be friends with Germany, etc. All of these countries that are like-minded. We'll see. Well, Israel used to be. We used to think they were like-minded, but in any case, if you think they are, if this is something you want, then we can talk about should there be any bilateral aid or not. I think there should not. They are a modern country. They can defend themselves just like every other country can defend themselves. And they are clearly the military power in the Middle East. And nobody by themselves or in any kind of combination can overcome what they have. There's no army that can march on Israel. They have nuclear weapons. They don't need our money. They can do it on themselves, just like Germany can do it on itself. Japan can do it on itself. We don't need to do all of that for everybody all the time. Arguments can be held in that. Debates can be made. No question about it. But what no other country on this planet is even talking about is fusing the armed forces for their use in their region. Look, I never signed up in my 21 years of active service to defend another country and to go and fight and die for the absurd lust of the leader of another country in another part of the world that has nothing to do with American national interests. He tries to make it so he lied in there about saying, oh, we have common interests. No, you are exploiting Americans to make them think they have common interests in you when we don't in the national security realm. We don't. Iran was never a threat to us, never. All these wars we fought with them have all been unjustified. All of them. None of them were necessary. And yet we go down that path on a daily basis. And now they're saying that's not enough. And now I think some are saying, you know what, man, one way or the other, this war's going to be over pretty soon. And then there's going to be a lot of move to try to put some distance in. We better codify this quick and get it locked in. That's what's going on here right now. You need to be aware of that. Now, if you're okay with that, this is a free country. And even though I think it's a terrible idea, I guess if you want to support it, then good on you. I don't. And I recommend everybody else who doesn't to send a note to their congressman. At least put some heat on them. Send in a letter, send in an email, go visit them, go up to their office. It's always uncomfortable when they do that. Bring a camera, video yourself going there, put that on your social media, make it uncomfortable for them, folks. We've got to do something. I mean, I'm doing what I can with this channel. You do what you can with your assets. You have some availability and capability. Let's all do whatever we can for the good of our country. They're doing what they want to for what they perceive as their at points that they want to accomplish, then we should do likewise. Let's don't let all the action be on the side that harms our country and abuses our armed forces. Thanks a lot, folks. Appreciate you. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Right now, West Asia, or known also as Middle East, is in a single miscalculation away from an all-out war. This is exactly what just happened with the U.S. provocation. And this after the United States jets sort of targeted Iranian bases in Qashm and in Bandar Abbas. And you know what happened? Iran didn't just back down. They fired back, slamming missiles directly into U.S. assets at Kuwait International Airport. And I have the pictures to prove it and show it to you. So the fragile ceasefire that we've been talking about, for the last whatever many weeks, is in theater. Yeah, is in theater right now. It is, that's it. And the U.S. Navy is on a high alert, as I got yesterday some confirmation regarding the Fifth Fleet. And this is exactly what the mainstream media isn't telling you the truth about the damage that Iran has caused. And again, I have the pictures to show it and prove it to you. So in this live stream, I'm going to be providing you my own analysis about this recent development, which started yesterday, June 3rd. That's when it happens, and I'll share some information with you from different sources in West Asia, and just provide you my own insight. And I'll conclude with some clips, and I'm gonna be playing with you. So now, the logical question to be asked is really, how close are we? Some say World War III. Yes, there's a possibility to that. Let's just call it a major war, and this is exactly what happened with the recent U.S. strikes on Qashm Island and Bandar Abbas. As a matter of fact, I have the pictures to show you. This is Qashm Island right there. And this is exactly, and Bandar Abbas. Bandar Abbas is right here. And this is exactly what happened when the U.S. carried out as targeted tactical response. What the U.S. is saying, we just want to get into, preemptive of sort. Because those attacks, which was initiated by the United States, to me, I look at it as a provocation, no more, no less. And this tells you about the military scrimmages in the Persian Gulf that is ongoing between the US and Iran. So both nations now are currently operating under this fragile, sort of somehow strained ceasefire. But apparently the US has broken down, and I'm going to tell you why. But before I do this, I'm going to share a clip with you, and I want to show you exactly the images that mainstream media in the West might not allow that one. This one is from Angelo Giuliano. I consider him a friend. He's been on the show a couple times, and I'm going to share with you, share the screen and let you read for yourself. So I'm not going to read it for you out loud. So let's, let's take a look here to the screen, and I'm going to share it. Okay, hold on a second. All right, right there. Now I'm going to make this bigger for you a little bit, so to see what you can. And right there, you can see the images. This is in Kuwait City Airport, badly damaged. Those are the images, and I trust Angelo. He's not going to just make up things. There is no such thing, because I confirmed it from a different sources, and I have the link. I'm going to share it with you later on to show you the damages that's been caused. So now at least you saw it with your own eyes to know that the damage has been or happened. That is. So what I'm going to do now is provide you the U.S. perspective about this and the Iran perspective, and of course, like I always do, let you make your own decision. So here is the U.S. explanation. This is what the United States, the Pentagon, is saying. Our action are in self-defense. Self-defense from what? We'll go with that. So here is what the Central Command is saying, and even some American officials are saying. They are stating that the strikes were preemptive, were localized, meaning limited location for that, and of self-defense nature. And when those officials were asked why, they said, oh, this act by the United States or this provocation meant to counter immediate threats to international shipping and U.S. forces, rather than an attempt to provoke a full-scale war. This is the U.S. explanation, which doesn't make any sense since the U.S. is also imposing blockade, and Iran has issued a warning that they have for international shipping and so forth, they have to coordinate with Iran. So what is the threat here? And that is exactly why the U.S. went ahead with this. I think Donald Trump was forced into taking action. And we all know who controls Donald Trump. So what happened with these attacks? Because I need to explain to you what was targeted in these two locations. There are specific targets that have been aimed at in these two locations, Bandar Abbas and also in Qashm Island. So the two main ones that were attacked there is the drone ground control and the radars. And that's where the U.S. fighter jets hit a ground control station and a radar installation on both Qashm Island and Bandar Abbas. And the justification for the Central Command is saying, oh, those sites were preparing to launch one-way attack drone threatening naval and commercial ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Well, wait a minute. Under what condition Iran will do that? Only if the ships didn't coordinate with Iran. As a matter of fact, if you remember, last time I did live stream for you, I remember telling you that Iran allowed about 33 ships to pass, and they did pass. Of course, some other data stated that it was only 31. To my knowledge, based on the research that I did, was 33. The point is not that 31 or 33. The point is that the ships coordinated with Iran and they were able to pass. So when the US said, oh, we had to attack because we were preventing a one launch strike by Iran on the ships, there were none. The other one has to do with the US justifying its action by mine laying interdiction. In other words, they wanted to intercept what Iran is doing with laying the mines in the Persian Gulf. Okay, since when? Iran already did that. The mines are already there. And this is where you have to see, and the Central Command justification is, we caught the Iranian laying naval mines in the Strait of Hormuz, and were subsequently eliminated, which we know, you and I know, it's a lie. Anything coming out of the White House, anything coming out of the Pentagon, anything coming out of State Department is a lie. Here is the third justification that the US is saying. We had to attack the anti-air defense threats. Threats, not missiles, not launchers, threats. Like some concept in the air. The US justification is that there is a base, there is a surface-to-air missile known as SAM, a launching pad in Bandar Abbas. This is why the US went ahead and attacked that particular site of SAM in Bandar Abbas, surface-to-air missile. Once again, the US has to justify this. And the US is saying, those missiles, those launch pads are attacking American fighter jets, warplanes. Well, they will attack American fighter jets if you cross into Iran airspace. And of course, they will have the right because you violated their airspace. You violated their sovereignty. What do you expect? And the fourth element that the US is stating is that this has to do with the blockade enforcement. So when you consider, in tandem with the strikes, US forces fired the Hellfire missile to disable an oil tanker. And why? Because the oil tanker was attempting to bypass the American naval blockade on Iranian ports. Yeah, if the US is doing a blockade and they justifying that, Iran will have the right to respond. And this is exactly lead me to talk about the Iran perspective. Iran sees this act as an act of aggression. That's one. And second one is it violates that so-called fragile ceasefire. So Iran strongly rejected this defensive framing from Washington, and rightly so, if I may, because the strikes by the US is really an illegal provocation. That's the way I see it. Looking from outside in, that's the only way I explain it. To give you a better example, it's like what happened a few years ago in South China Sea. The US sent the frigate and some naval assets through the South China Sea near Chinese border and called it, freedom of navigation. You come in closer, they didn't cross. Let me just emphasize this. Those naval assets didn't cross the 12 nautical mile known by international law. Nonetheless, why do you need to go that close to the Chinese border? And when the Chinese and the Russians, because I remember that incident, sent their naval assets near Alaska, we cried foul. The Chinese and the Russians are near our borders. How do you think the other countries feel? And this is exactly why I look at this action by the US as an illegal provocation. Because now, what the US just did, it's really violating that ceasefire, no matter how you look at it, fragile, weak, whatever. It was some sort of a ceasefire that existed. The US just violated it open. And that's why the Foreign Ministry of Iran condemned these attacks on Checkmate Island. Because what the US ended up targeting, they targeted the communication towers and the radar towers as well. Because it's it's an aggression. Simple as that. There's no other way of saying it. And why there is another problem with this from an international perspective? It's because those locations, not the military sites, is the civilian telecommunication tower. This is considered a civilian sovereign infrastructure. In a war, there are laws, then there are rules. You don't engage in destroying civilian infrastructure. You have to, we do know this, but at the same time, we are not a signatory to the sort of certain organizations that deal with war crimes and all that stuff. We're not a signatory to it. But in this case, this is what the US did. Targeting a civilian and sovereign infrastructure is a violation of the law because he crossed the lines now. When you start targeting the coastline, when you start targeting infrastructure, when you start targeting oil tankers, rather than purely offensive military installations, the explanation is there. It became clear to the rest of the world to see who the aggressor is. And this is again where Iran comes in, the immediate retaliation. Iran didn't hold back, didn't wait, and the US was thinking, oh, we're gonna just fire at Iran, we're gonna intimidate them. It looks like we haven't learned anything for the last 3+ decades. You're not gonna intimidate the Iranians, the Persians for that matter. And in response to this, Qashm and Bandar Abbas, let me put the map here. This is Qashm Island, and this is Bandar Abbas, just for you to know where everything is. In response to this, the IRGC went ahead and launched a wave of ballistic missiles and drones. They sent 2 types. Okay? That's why that devastation you saw when I shared the clip earlier, how massive it was in Kuwait. And now Kuwait is crying foul. Well, wait a minute. I was in Kuwait. I passed through to the military installations there because my unit back then in the military, we were used to rotate to Kuwait and Egypt. So we do have a massive presence in Kuwait. Now it becomes on Kuwait. You're the one who allowing this. And at the same time, in my opinion, Iran is sending a strong message, not just to Kuwait, to the rest of the Gulf states. All of them. Let me put, as long as you have US military installations there, you are a target because the launching of the attacks on Iran is coming from those locations. Of course, there we go. My screen froze for a minute. Of course, the US is saying, oh, we are not launching from this kind of, we're launching from an aircraft carrier. I don't buy that. I don't buy that. But again, there is a reason for that. Iran didn't go and attack Saudi Arabia. No, they attacked Kuwait. And Kuwait because the US presence and where some of the operations was launched from. So this tit for tat, rather, escalation over drone shootdowns and the ship transit. And this is, again, where you have to understand something that is invisible. And what is that thing that is invisible? As an analyst, you're going to have to think in terms, what it all this means? What messages are both sending? This is where you have the calculated diplomatic and strategic play that is under the ground, hidden behind this launching of missiles and so forth. There is a diplomatic, a calculated one, and there is also a strategic play here in this scenario. And the 2 you can think of, you think of the negotiating leverage. Here is the thing. Donald Trump is intentionally keeping up heavy military pressure on Iran's coast. Okay? Why? The strategic objective is to systematically degrade the infrastructure Iran uses to threaten the Strait of Hormuz. That's his argument. Of course, that's Mr. Trump. He's not all together. So this pressure aims to force, in his opinion, is going to force Tehran into a permanent peace deal with the United States, of course, and Israel, that must include strict provisions to dismantle its nuclear program and uranium enrichment capabilities. Well, good luck with that, Mr. Trump. Keep dreaming. Good luck with that. But again, that's what Trump is thinking. Okay? The second thing is the fragile diplomacy. And you're going to have to consider this a part of this equation. Both sides, and this is not just from the US on this one here. Both sides continue the talks to a degree, but also continue the trade heavy strikes. Look what the US did. Look what Iran's response was. And neither Washington nor Tehran has officially declared the April ceasefire completely dead. That is the key. Iranians are playing the game. The US thinking they have the upper hand when it's not. And this is why you have right now, and I just checked it this morning, the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, the head of Qatar, they are trying to figure out a way of mediation. This is where you have the regional mediation is so heavily now stalled because they all realize as long as American forces still on your soil, you are a target. Simple as that. Iran made that clear. And if this Gulf state didn't get it, then they must be like not all right in the head. Because it's as clear as it gets. You don't have to be an analyst to figure this out. And that is why now they are trying to push for communication with mediators and so forth. But nothing is moving forward because what the US did and what Israel is doing in southern Lebanon. Remember, those issues are not resolved. And Israel's by attack in southern Lebanon is wanted to not allow the US to have any agreement or reach a deal with Iran. Of course, the US is thinking we're going to pressure Iran into submission. Good luck with that. And that's the harsh reality that Washington is not willing to accept. That is the problem in Washington. And this leads me to think about this response of Iran by attacking US base in Kuwait. Because Iran is framing these strikes by missiles and drones against US assets in Kuwait and Bahrain. By the way, let me see your answer in the chat box if you happen to know which country that was. You're right, Abbas Ibrahim. You're right. He's in Bahrain. That's what it is. So that's where the Iran now is responding. Because Iran justified its attack or response, I'm sorry, not attack, a response as a provocation from the United States. And this is where the region now is worrying about, we're going to have to mediate somehow. But here is the stupidity, if I may use the term. Those Muslim states in the Persian Gulf are not addressing the fundamental question, the fundamental issue. And that fundamental issue is, as long as you have US presence on your soil, you are a target. Because Iran is not going to trust taking the word of those Arab states when they say, oh, nothing is launched from our soil. But if nothing is launched from your soil, why do you still have American presence there? And this is where Iran's strategy comes in. This is when you really, really realize Iran is not going into this emotionally. No. They have a plan and they have a strategy. Because Iran's response strategy is operating on 3 distinct fronts. You have the asymmetrical denial, You have the diplomatic leverage, and you have the threat expansion against the Gulf states, as long as they allow the presence of American presence there. And this is, again, what Iran's message to the Persian Gulf states are. A retaliatory claim, a lesson learned or served, or a message delivered. The barrage of the missiles and drones that IRGC launched targeting U.S. forces in Kuwait and the Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain were direct, proportional response to the U.S. strikes on Qashm Island and Bandar Abbas. Eye for an eye, tit for tat. And that's exactly what the Iranian state media signaled with these strikes. It used a specific word. I read the article for that, and I put it in quotes. When it says, these attacks should serve as a lesson, in quote. And by this logic, when you think about it, the immediate timeline, by the time the U.S. launched the attack, it was followed by a strike by Iran. Of course, Iran has to do one more thing. And you know what that thing is? Is that has to state, you guys know how it is in a war. The information becomes also another tool. How you word the message, how you deliver that. By having Iran denying a civilian intent, it clears itself. They are not targeting civilians, which their objective wasn't civilians, but there is the presence of the U.S. in those facilities. Remember, the airport in Kuwait is where the U.S. military hardware lands. It's like what Ben Gurion now is becoming, which I will share a picture with you in a second here. So despite the heavy damage on Terminal 1 at Kuwait International Airport, I remember I've been there, so it's a big airport. So one person was killed, and there were injured. It's like what happened with that school in Iran, where 167 girls, but that was targeted. Why did we launch a missile at a school girl? Where girls go study. Kids, those are kids. That's a violation of international law. That's a war crime. However, in this case, Iran maintains that its military only targets U.S. installations and hold Kuwait directly responsible for hosting American forces. It's exactly what I've been saying since the beginning of the war. And I recall saying that if those Gulf states do not come to grips with the reality that they're going to remain target as long as the U.S. military presence continues there. And here we are. And that in itself, the message from Iran to the Gulf is that's going to now a much wider threat to the Gulf states. Of course, the U.S. is always going to say to the Gulf states, we are behind you. We will defend you. Good luck with that. We won't defend anybody. Look what we've been saying to Ukraine. And that's why Taiwan now is getting the message. It's because what Iran is doing with this neighboring Gulf states, is Iran is targeting the source of where the attacks are planned, hatched, launched, and directed. And that's exactly what the Iranian Foreign Ministry issued this severe warning, stating that it will target the origin and source of any U.S. strikes. Yeah, to me, it's common sense. You, the host country, you are allowing your territory, allowing U.S. military presence, allowing the launch of the attacks from your territory, in this case, Kuwait, Bahrain. That's directly it's their responsibility. That's why the Saudis, 2 weeks ago, went ahead and said to the Americans, sorry, you can use our airspace to launch anything. You can use our space, period, regarding Iran war. Use it for something else, but that's about it. And that in itself, Iran is thinking in terms of imposing a cost. This is a strategic cost in the U.S. partners, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. And if you think as from an intelligence perspective, if you are an intelligence analyst, you're going to say to yourself, Iran is shifting to a strategy of striking regional states. Because why? Because Tehran calculates that by damaging local infrastructure, like in Kuwait airport case, it can pressure America's Arab allies into restricting U.S. military flights, operations, and what have you, without directly involving the U.S. And that's exactly the point of Iran, why it did what it did. If the truth matters to you, hit like, subscribe, and tap that bell. No spin, no agenda, just the stories. Not walking away from the negotiating table. No, entirely, but of course. No. They're using the attacks as a sort of a form of brinkmanship. It's a leverage. That's exactly how it works. It's because American government cannot be trusted. What we will say we'll do this and do that, and look what we just did. Because what we just did is provocation. Simple, plain and simple. It's provocation. When you target the communication infrastructure, that's also cell phones where people use. Those considered civilian infrastructure. When you target bridges, those are civilian infrastructures. At the same time, Iran is still going through back channels, which is Qatar and Pakistan. That back channel still remain active as of now. I just want you to be aware of that. Because here is what the leadership in Iran, especially with Mujtaba Khamenei, they are stating that the US bases in West Asia or Middle East are no longer safe. That's the direct quote from them. That's from Mujtaba Khamenei and his advisors. Are no longer safe. Well, if you are Kuwait, if you are Bahrain, if you are Qatar, if you are Saudi Arabia, if you are United Arab Emirates, you're going to have to listen carefully and read between the lines. Yeah, that's exactly what the meaning of it. US bases in the region are no longer safe. Can't get clearer than that. It's because what Iran, the message is sending, without saying it, is that Iran intends. Here is what we plan. Here is what we intend to do. Without telling you, we're only going to put a quote for you, is that American bases in the region are all target. Doesn't have to point to a specific country, because Iran is intending to use this sort of missile strikes to prove the status quo is unsustainable for Washington. And that's with one objective, and that objective is to force a final deal that guarantees total US military withdrawal from the Gulf in exchange for permanent peace. It's because simple, and the simplicity of it is this. I'm going to put back the map of the Middle East, or West Asia rather. Or this one right there. Sorry, right there. As long as the US presence in this Gulf, Iran will never be safe. And here is the harsh reality that I'm going to share with you. If this issue, that is the conflict that is going on right now, is not resolved the way it's supposed to be, and US, we said, oh, we entered into a peace and now that's it, everything is fine. No, it's not. It's because, mark my word on it, 10 to 15 years from now, we're going to see the same scenario. I argued back then, before I even wrote the book, before I even completed my my doctoral studies, when I was in college, and a master's degree was studying and all that stuff. And I argued back then. And the argument I made with some colleagues and professors when we would talk, I said, Iran will never bow to the US despite the pressure of sanctions. That was back in the 90s. And here we are. And that's my point. The Gulf states needs to understand this reality. And this leads me to talk about one more key theme in this live stream. And this has to do with Iran's nuclear bomb. And I'm going to be sharing this with you in a form of a question. Does Iran have a nuke? Of course, they are different. When I jump into conclusions here, it's because I like to have evidence. I like to be sure of the sources. And I usually check and double check and triple check to make sure. But I'm not going to refrain from asking the question, does Iran have them? Some will say, well, some sources say they are. When you have at least during my days in Washington, the intelligence community, even international watchdogs, all of them say Iran possesses an operational nuclear weapon. Then you have independent commentator, you have whatever else, YouTube programs, whatever, interviews. And the interesting aspect is you hear it from US officials. As a matter of fact, I just heard one from Marco Rubio is saying about admitting that Israel has a nuclear weapon, which is unusual for, they don't come out openly and say. But regarding Iran, he and others like him will always say inside sources, but they don't have the proof. They don't have the proof. Oh, that's why we're doing what we're doing. We want to prevent this because of inside sources. Well, I'm here to tell you, I'll ask the question, does Iran have nukes? But I will not answer because of an inside source, because I don't have that. That's one. Second, I cannot confirm that. But that doesn't mean we cannot leave the question open. So the consensus among even the IAEA, which I don't trust, the International Atomic Energy Agency, even the assessments among the US intelligence community, even the assessments of some well-established geopolitical analysts from around the world remain conclusive. And the conclusion is that Iran has not built or tested a functional bomb. That's where it stands today. My argument, because I might be having different type of information from reliable sources, might have the capability to assemble one in no time. And I think after the assassination of Ali Khamenei, his son Mujtaba, moving forward with it. So the distinctions between what is in Iran or what Iran has as far as capabilities and what's been stated by those inside sources, because I can call them rumors, this will rely on three key elements. And the three key elements or realities are, for example, the fissile material versus a completed bomb. You can have the material, but you don't have the completed bomb. And this is why I've been always saying this. We might even use the term Iran has the nukes as far as material, but not a complete product. And this is where some might misunderstand of how close Iran has come to having the capability to make one. Now, with what just happened with this war, they are ready to move to the next phase. How long is it going to take them to make that final decision? I do not know. I do not know. All I know is that the supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, and his people surrounding him are moving into that direction. Some voices inside Tehran are moving into that direction. is because this will repeat again. If Iran, the way I see it, and please guys, correct me if I'm wrong, if you disagree, that's what we are here for, is to exchange ideas. The way I see the strategic mistake, and I did say this before, the strategic mistake Iran is making is if it enters into another deal with the US, only to see 10 or 20 years from now, the scenario being repeated again. And that is, again, when you think about this fissile material versus completed bomb, the stockpile. The IAEA has said that Iran has built significant stockpile, and Iran admitted it. It's not like they hide in that. No. They hide in there's a record there. You're looking at over 400 kilograms. As a matter of fact, the last number I saw was 440. It was another database from a military institute overseas, stated that it was about 440. So between 440 and 460 kilograms of enriched uranium. And that enriched uranium was up to 60. It won't take them long to increase that if they want to 90, if they have. So, and the breakout time, when you think about this, the 60% enriched material is considered near weapons grade. And that is why I'm saying, once Iran makes the political decision to break out and further enrich this 1-90, which won't take them long anyway, yeah, it could produce enough fissile core for a bomb in a matter of days, not months, not weeks, not years. No, in a matter of days. And I am sensing, and again, based on what I'm reading, I'm sensing that they are moving into that direction. Will they make a decision tomorrow? I don't know. All I know is that they are moving into it. And this is, again, where that missing steps are. They are missing parts that you need to understand about this. Is that having a uranium core is not the same as having a working weapon. And this is even the data, the information inside the intelligence subcommittee inside Congress in the US, which is like part of the US Congressional Research Service, which deal with classified and sensitive information. Iran still lacks some viable nuclear weapon designs. But how hard will it be given the conditions now, how hard will it be for Iran to reach out to other countries, ask for that? Then it has, of course, if they do that, they're going to have to do a flight test for re-entry vehicle for a ballistic missile. That was the reason why Iran went ahead and launched at Diego Garcia base, because that was an ICBM. Then you have to have specialized detonation, explosive detonation for that system that will work. All these components, you have to sort of gather them into a deliverable missile warhead, and that takes a few weeks to put that together. Suffice it to say that the impact of the recent military strikes, Iran came to the realization that by doing so, Iran is going to respond and target or disturb or disrupt rather the ordinary life in the Gulf states. Simple as that. I mean, when you have even the US CIA, the US Director of National Intelligence, before she resigned, stating that Iran do not have a weapon. All they are referring to is the idea that the nuclear nodes, they have the pieces together, but nothing has been sort of structured yet. And this is where Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan, because there is a barrier to that. And the last thing I want to mention here, it has to do with, while we're talking about the nukes here, you have another leader, world leader, that's Kim Jong-un, just did something a few days ago. And what did he do? He announced the doubling of military nuclear material production. Once again, read between the lines. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, he said that his country now, production of weapon-grade nuclear material has more than doubled. Yeah, he understands. He's not going to do the same mistake Iran did. This is the targeting of those locations. This is the Isfahan and the locations of Iran's nuclear program. But for Kim, it's a different ballgame. He is drawing a lesson from this. Because Kim remarks came during an inspection of a nuclear material production facility that recently went into operation. And that's exactly the picture I'm sharing with you right there. Those are Iran missiles, but I do have one that's the largest ICBM for Iran, which that one, by the way, can hit the US, anywhere in the US, by the way. And Kim Jong-un pledged now to strengthen North Korea's military nuclear capability. He didn't say military capability, military nuclear capability. And he also revealed that his country has an ambitious future plan regarding the nuclear deterrence or capabilities. If I am to read this between the lines, I'm going to read it in this way. I'm going to read it in a way that the Russians is going to share some upgrade technology with the North Koreans regarding the ICBMs, nuclear tipped, because the Russians just tested something very, 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 very destructive. Very destructive. And the multiple warheads that can carry nuclear payload. Basically, you flatten everything all in one strike. That is how I read Kim Jong-un pledging that to upgrade North Korea's military nuclear capabilities. Because to Kim, this time represents literally the best period ever for a successful change regarding the nuclear doctrine. Because to him is an historic moment. And that in itself marks some sort of a milestone, because he is learning from what's taking place in Iran. If Iran had developed its nuclear capability back then, we won't be having this conversation altogether. And that, with that, come one more question, which put really things to test. When you think about North Korea, okay, and when you think about Iran, is why is North Korea, why a nuclear power is permissible for North Korea, but is forbidden for Iran? And it's something, in my opinion, it's worth asking. It's worth asking. I'm still don't have the exact answer. I have some sort of an answer, but I want to hear from you first before I share mine in the comments when I respond to you. So here's my conclusion for you, because I want to conclude this, play some clips for you and sign off. So the ongoing clash, the ongoing now that is taking place in the Persian Gulf, in the area near Qishm and Bandar Abbas. It proves that a fragile truce cannot survive without a real diplomatic agreement or compromise, for that matter, as both Washington and Tehran trade now these devastating strikes, because those are devastating. Of course, here in the media, when I say here, I'm referring to the US. I'm not in the US. The US, and I read, of course, from a distance here, and I call and I check, and they're now reporting it as is. Oh, no damage has been caused. But those are devastating strikes, just to let you know. And the risk of an uncontainable regional war grows with every single day as we move forward, especially now that Congress is now challenging Trump, might end up putting a pause on this war because it's Congress that decides. So even Republicans are turning on Trump himself. But again, people get what they vote for in America. Now, all politicians corrupted in America. Anyway, you all know we're not going to beat the dead horse here. So what do you think? Will these severe tactical exchanges force both? This is my question for you. Force both Iran and the US into permanent peace, a deal of sort? Or, in your opinion, have we just witnessed now the opening salvos of an unstoppable global conflict? Let me repeat this question for you, because I would like to really read your feedback on this. Will this severe tactical exchanges between the US and Iran sort of force both sides into a permanent peace or a deal? Or have we just now witnessed the opening salvos of an unstoppable global conflict? So make sure to leave me your comments in the comment section if you feel like it. I would greatly appreciate it. All right, let me share clips with you as promised, and I'm going to sign off after that. The first clip I'm going to share with you
the intelligence community says, they very well may have one. They may very well more than one, because I think both Ted Postle's made the point, and I think John Mearsheimer made the same point on your show yesterday.
Right.
That if they're going to do it, they better have more than one, because if you got multiples, then that changes Israel's entire calculation.
We told you on Monday that Iran, most likely credible reports that Iran has nukes. So here's one of the guys who reported it. His name is Pepe Escobar, but Pepe, really? He looks like he could use some rest. Am I right? Come on. Come on.
Pepe's been working all night on this story.
So here's what he said today on Judge Napolitano's show about his reporting and how he found this out.
Sure. I asked our Pakistani connection to, can you grill this guy again and again and again? And at the end...
So he's talking to his source, this Pakistani guy. He said, can you grill the guy who's saying that Iran has a nuke? Can you grill him?
We got a definitive answer. Look, if I didn't want you to break the story, I wouldn't never have given it to you. And this is what our sources reveal to us. And this is the bombshell in itself. Pezeshkian to Sharif over the phone directly, he delivered a very well structured 3-step sort of ultimatum that he said to Sharif should be communicated.
So this was the president of Iran telling the Pakistani guy, we have 3 ultimatums to get, if you want us to get rid of our nuclear capability, this is our threat. So here's what they are.
To the White House immediately. Number 1, which is something that the Iranians have been insisting on for the past few weeks. No nuclear talks. That's it.
None.
Unless we go to stage number 1, end of all wars. Stage number 2, we start discussing Strait of Hormuz. Then we have nuclear talks. Point number 2, no more prospective nuclear treaty framework. These were the words that our source
meaning nothing like the JCPOA.
Exactly. Not even getting towards a JCPOA, which, considering the circumstances, the best the Trump administration.
Now, the JCPOA was the nuclear deal that Obama struck with Iran, that they would agree to not enrich to nuclear grade for a bomb, and that they would agree to be monitored by the International Atomic Agency. So that's the JPCOA, and now they're saying we're not even going to do that. You're not even going to get that deal that we had because Trump ripped it up. Trump ripped it up, and then they attacked them.
And then Netanyahu made him eat it.
Yeah.
Administration can get now is a sort of diluted JCPOA, and the Iranians are saying no, not even that, because first you need to go to stage 1 and 2, end of all wars, and then we start discussing Hormuz. Without that, we discuss nothing. And then the number 3, which is at the heart of what we revealed on Monday. And of course, there's a lot of controversy, more than expected everywhere. Pezeshkian said, if American threats persist, we can go for the detonation of a nuclear device on Iranian soil without specifying. Is this a bomb that Iran already has? Is this a bomb that only Iran developed? Is this a bomb that they could count on Russian input to develop? Or it was delivered, ready-made, let's put it this way, by Pakistan or by North Korea?
So what he's saying there is that Iran says, so we're not even going to talk about the nuclear program until you stop doing war on us. And then B, we have to come to a negotiated deal about the Strait of Hormuz. And now he's saying number 3, we're gonna explode a bomb in Iran to let you know we have it. Right? That's how I'm reading this. Okay. And where did we get it from? Did we make it ourselves? Did we get it from Russia? Who helped us with this? So that's what he's saying.
Nothing. The source did not elaborate on that. He was elaborating on what Pezeshkian actually told Sharif. So this detonation would happen, in the words of Pezeshkian, translated by our source, executed not as an act of war, but as an irreversible sovereign demonstration of capability to control escalation dominance.
So what they're saying is, yeah, we're gonna let you know we have this nuclear. By the way, that's how great the war is going. Now Iran has a nuke. So
good job, and we're gonna just get I think we're almost out of gas too, so that should hit just as we find out they have a nuke.
We're depleted all of our oil reserves, so gas is about to spike again in price. We're out of it, right? Within the next couple of weeks, so gas prices are going to spike even higher.
I hope I can fill my tank with the sweet words of Dave Rubin.
So they also didn't get regime change.
Oh,
they lost control of the Strait of Hormuz, and now Iran has a nuke.
Oh,
so this has been what you want to know how well the war is going. That's how well it's going,
well as everything else. You're saying, yeah.
And so what Iran is saying. So that Iran was telling this. That's the President Pezeshkian, however you say his name, was telling the negotiator in Pakistan to tell the White House all these things. Tell them that, and. So what they're really revealing here is that even to begin to negotiate with the United States on an even plane, you have to whip out your own nuclear weapons and flop it on the table before a single word can be exchanged, because every time they have an agreement, the United States kills the negotiators or starts bombing their country.
Hey, haven't we not been fucking with North Korea for a while? I can't put my finger on when we stopped, but I think it was around then when they got a nuke.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So that's that's the success of this war. It's had the exact opposite effect of everything Trump said it was. We have to make sure they don't get a nuclear weapon. They got one. We have to have regime change. They didn't get it. We got to open the strait. The strait's closed, and they're controlling it, and they control 25% of the world's oil.
So Trump did yell at Bibi, and that's not made up, because that sounds like the thing he'd yell about.
Yeah, I don't believe that Trump yelled at Bibi.
I know he would never go against the master.
Here's more. Now, here's Larry, who was on our show Monday with Garland Nixon, and he's gonna tell you even more.
They'll be kept in a where they can't be.
So where are the nuclear bombs that Iran has? Where are they?
They'll be kept in a where they can't be destroyed. I mean, Iran's nuts. You know, they started building. They built all these underground cities and missile factories in the aftermath of 2003 when we invaded Iraq, and they were hardened specifically against a nuclear blast. And we've already seen that, you know, these are so-called obliterated. Even U.S. intelligence has reported over the last 2 weeks that, you know, these things that were supposedly obliterated, they're wide open and operating again. So I think actually, and this may be the silver lining to this, it creates more incentive for an actual serious negotiation on the part of the United States. But part of that's going to require reining in Israel to get Israel to stop its campaign of murdering Lebanese and Palestinians.
Good luck.
Good
luck with that, because that ain't happening. I forget what this clip is about. Let's play it. They built these I showed you video before. They built the underground cities where they have all their missiles, and we can't get to them. And they did. When did they start doing that? When we invaded Iraq, because they knew they were going to be next. Well, it was actually Libya next, and then it was Syria and Yemen, and now it's them.
I'm pretty sure that they don't have a secure telephone, that they're not using
So this conversation between the president of Iran and the Pakistan negotiator, they didn't use a satellite phone, right? So they just used a regular phone, knowing that it would be tapped by the CIA and the Mossad. Why would they do that? Well, he's going to tell you.
I'm pretty sure that they don't have a secure telephone, that they're not using a tactical satellite radio.
Well,
I could be wrong.
CIA, MI6, and Mossad heard it.
Yeah, that's my point. In fact, that may have been the very point, the reason they did it. If they did it over an open line, they wanted to make sure that everybody heard it, including Israelis, Unit 8200. They intercepted it, United States. And so everybody's got to now take a big breath and go, is this for real? Again, when you get into these kinds of issues with intelligence, you know, this person, once you know the bona fides of the person, you know that they do have this kind of access. They are not.
So what he's talking about is their source who told them about this. They do have this access to know this. Okay.
Hearing something around the water cooler, or they're not hearing rumors in the bathroom. This is something that they would have been involved with the decision making from the standpoint of Pakistan, knowing what is being communicated with Iran and what Iran is communicating with them. So, and that's why I say I am struck by how cautious Trump has been. You know, this was so far that we're day 3 this week since that news broke. And I don't recall him once making an overt threat against Iran like he did 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. So I think the intelligence community says, you know, they very well may have one. They may very well more than one, because I think both Ted Postel's made the point, and I think John Mearsheimer made the same point on your show yesterday,
right?
That if they're going to do it, they better have more than one, because if you got multiples, then that changes Israel's entire calculation.
So what do Israel?
So Iran doesn't just have one. They most likely have more than one. But if Iran has nukes, Kurt, how's Israel going to be able to kill them and take all their stuff?
Well, that's what I worry about, Jimmy.
That's what I'm worried about.
That's that thing that keeps me up at night.
So was Tulsi Gabbard wrong, though, when she testified 14 months ago and said that the assessment of all the intelligence agencies was that they don't have a nuclear program? Let's listen to what Larry says.
Saying under oath before the Congress, Iran has not been developing a nuclear weapon since 2003. And then Trump saying, I don't care what she says. I think they do have one. Now it turns out she was wrong and Trump was right.
Well, no, she wasn't wrong. When she testified on that, she was correct. They hadn't done it.
This is a very recent vintage because that testimony is about 14 months ago.
No, I think this is recent vintage. Again, Iran didn't make this decision until after February 28th. For the second time, Iran was attacked out of the blue after engaging in good faith negotiations. In fact, this last round, they had made the most. They were talking about having made the most progress they had in any prior negotiation. And what does the United States do?
Kill the negotiators.
Along with Israel, they assassinate the top leadership.
Right.
And here's Mojtaba Khamenei, the new Ayatollah. He's there. He witnesses the death of his wife, the death of his baby girl, the death of his father, the death of his mother. And now he's in a position to influence this decision. You tell me any decent person in the world, if they witnessed their family being murdered, that they wouldn't seek some sort of justice? I mean, we're talking. This has nothing to do with any particular culture. This is ingrained in human beings. If you attack my family, I will defend my family.
Right. Has anybody picked this up besides you and Pepe? Anybody in the West covering this besides Judging Freedom?
Some other podcasts have been.
You mean the other podcast would be the Jimmy Dore Show?
Yeah.
We covered this on Monday.
You think it'd be bigger news?
You think this would be bigger news?
That Iran has nukes now.
You would think.
Ugh.
Mentioned it, but no, it hasn't. And people are going to come out and say, "Oh, Johnson's making." Look, folks, all I'm doing is telling you what a source that both Pepe and I have been able to check out, that we believe that this person has access to this kind of information, is in a position to know this kind of thing. And that's what he is saying. He believes it. Now, can I prove that? Absolutely, I can. So
you mentioned
there's the caveat.
You mentioned the Beatles song. I mean, what outside help might they have had? Pakistan itself, North Korea, Russia,
China, all of the above. I mean, right now, Russia and China are actively engaged with helping Iran stabilize in the aftermath of that attack on the 28th. And there's ample reports about both technology, military equipment, technical advice from experts. All of that's being provided. And, I imagine.
So Russia and China, and most likely Pakistan, is helping Iran with the nuclear bomb.
Well, they said hold back Iran, right? Didn't China restrain them? And then I'll bet you that was how they said, if they get screwed again, we'll give you a fucking bomb. How about you want to bet that's what it is?
Yeah, I'll bet you. Yep, yeah, because they did tell Iran hold back.
Right, Iran could have destroyed
every Gulf state
to fight them.
They could never win. They could have destroyed every Gulf state, knocked out their power plants, their desalination plants. They could have turned the Gulf states into deserts again, uninhabitable deserts, and they didn't. And that was Russia and China telling them to hold back. And now they're like, okay, we're going to get you a nuclear bomb. And it sounds like they have a couple of them now.
Well, now the long time for the recovery of Israel is what we need to focus on now, Jimmy.
All right. If you want to come see me tell jokes about this.
Coffee, follow me.